Welcome in once again, people. I salute you. This is Andrew Corns from the Revisionist Almanac, and we're back with another collaboration special. So if you missed it already this year over the summer, I had a collaboration project broken out into 3 parts because we had so many wonderful people who wanted to share their opinions about Steven Spielberg's 1981 action-adventure classic, Raiders of the Lost Ark. We are back now with the second collaboration of the calendar year for one of the revised Best Pictures from Season 1. What we did was we took all 12 Season 1 revised Best Picture winners. I turned the votes over to you to determine what 2 movies you wanted to see people talk about with more depth this year, and you voted on the 2 Spielberg movies that won, the first one being Raiders of the Lost Ark, and now we're here with 1998's Saving Private Ryan. So I have brought an entire troupe of people with me to help me unpack this movie. We're going to talk about what our memories were from the first time we saw Saving Private Ryan. We'll talk about how this movie compares to the other notable World War II film from 1998, that of course being Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line. We'll talk about our Mount Rushmore of films dealing with war. We'll go more in depth with did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director that year. We'll also talk about the very infamous win for Best Picture in 1998, Shakespeare in Love, and if Saving Private Ryan did indeed deserve that crown. I will also ask people what impact the John Williams score had on this emotional journey that many of us took with the film. We'll talk about the large ensemble cast of actors and if any of the particular members stood out to them. And then we'll also unpack just a little bit if this movie does a good job telling the story of World War II through an authentic historical lens, or if it has a little bit of an American war propaganda lean to it. But let me kick it off with 2 people who have already featured multiple times this year on the show. They are the founders of the streaming service Highball TV, one of the best in the business. They are writers, they are actors, they are co-directors of the recent film Paige Darcy, Reluctant Detective, which I had the chance to interview them on recently. Please let me introduce you once again to Melissa D'Agostino and Matt Campagna.
Hello, this is Melissa D'Agostino.
And Matt Campagna.
We are from Highball TV. You may have heard a little bit of us on a previous Revisionist Almanac podcast or 2.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to chat with Andrew on a couple of different things and talk about other Spielbergs.
Indeed. You can follow us at Highball TV, which is a streaming service that we co-founded, on pretty much any social. And then I'm at Melissa Dags.
And I'm usually at Matt Campagna.
Yeah, we're filmmakers, and we started a streaming service because why not?
Yeah, we thought we have pretty banging taste in movies, and we thought people might want to see some of them. So we collect them from around the world, from film festivals and cool independent places, and put them up there by hand. No algorithms allowed.
No, none at all. So, Matt.
Melissa.
Saving Private Ryan. I was going to do this on my own, and then...
I accidentally watched the movies with you.
Yeah. And then I said, do you want to be part of this? Because you had opinions.
Oh, when it comes to movies, I usually do. Yeah.
So, welcome to this Saving Private Ryan Revisionist Almanac episode.
That I'm crashing.
Yes, thanks for crashing. The Almanac crasher, Matt Campagna. So, the first question that Andrew poses is, what are your memories of seeing this movie for the first time? I must say I was rather obsessed with this movie. I was a teenager at the time. I think we both were the same age, so it was like, late 90s. And I watched the Rosie O'Donnell show a lot. And I will never forget the interview she did with Tom Hanks, Matt Damon, and Ed Burns. And I remember, details, verbatim details from that interview.
Wow.
And I remember being so excited for this movie. And I think part of that was Matt Damon and Ed Burns were, heartthrobby.
Hot commodities.
Yeah, actors at the time. I was a Spielberg fan. And I was a Tom Hanks fan, still am. And I remember going to see it in the theater right when it came out and just thinking it was amazing when I saw it. I was very moved by it. I think watching it after seeing that interview where they talk about training, one of my favorite anecdotes is that they had, army training. They had, whatever that's called.
Boot camp.
Thank you, boot camp. I was like, oh my goodness, I can't even remember what it's called. They had boot camp, and they didn't invite Matt Damon. Like, Spielberg specifically didn't invite Matt Damon
to make him ostracized by the others.
So that when he showed up for boot camp, everyone was really resentful, and that was really perfect for the movie.
It's such excellent manipulation.
Yeah, it's great. And then I remember that Tom Hanks talked about how everybody hated the rations that they had, but he knew how to spruce them up.
Oh yeah, he'd spice up the rations.
Yeah, so they would all go to his tent and try and get fancier rations.
Culinary adventures out of a can.
Yeah. So, I mean, weirdly, this movie had a really big impact on me, even just peripherally, from the standpoint of the news around it.
This movie had almost no impact on me.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember when it came out, I remember hearing that some war vet had collapsed in the aisles in a screening, and I was like, oh, damn, I should go see this.
Yeah.
And then I saw this, and I was like, really? That's it?
Man.
That was my experience with this movie. Plus, this is not, to me, this is Spielberg playing outside of what my version of his wheelhouse is.
Right. Yeah, you and I have there are different pockets of Spielberg we appreciate most. Yeah,
World War II
true.
Spielberg is just not my jam without a fedora.
Okay, yeah, fascinating. How do you think that Saving Private Ryan compares to the other notable World War II film from 1998, Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line? Now, I hadn't seen The Thin Red Line until just recently. That was one that just sort of was not on my radar at the time. And it's interesting because rewatching Saving Private Ryan, I didn't find it as amazing as I did when I was 18 for several reasons, which we can go into. The Thin Red Line, I found sort of perplexing, but I mean, it's Terrence Malick. I liked certain things about it. I liked the psychological angle, the very esoteric sort of angle, but it felt very aimless to me, and I prefer a tighter narrative, generally speaking, unless I'm watching something that really is leaning into no narrative. I felt like this was sort of in the middle of those two things. So I prefer Private Ryan, but not by much. I find them sort of equal in terms of, they're very different, but they're sort of equally interesting, equally, well-made.
Yeah, I think now that we're, a quarter century from when these films came out, I feel like the things that made Saving Private Ryan groundbreaking and unusually gripping, and the verisimilitude of it is just kind of what everything is now. So rewatching it now, it doesn't have much. It doesn't have the kind of teeth it did then.
Right.
And I say that as someone who wasn't blown away even then.
Interesting.
But I think The Thin Red Line is a war poem that will never lose its relevance.
That is fair. Yeah, I like that.
So, yeah, for me, now, I'd say Thin Red Line edges out Private Ryan for me.
Okay. Yeah, I find it hard to... They're so different. I don't know. This is one of those things where movies get compared because they're similar subject
movies.
matter.
Yeah.
They're both movies. They come out at the same time. And I know it's because Private Ryan got so much attention.
And they're both so star-studded.
Yeah, it's true. Although Malick, cut out so many of the stars.
The nice thing is Spielberg knew that the stars you cast should be in the movie. Malick, not so much.
That's right. So what is your Mount Rushmore of films dealing with war, any war?
I think you should go first.
This isn't nearly impossible for me, but the movies that I like about wars are not necessarily about soldiers.
Okay.
And I think that that this is why I think even as I'm doing this, I'm revising my choices.
Oh my God. Yeah, I just noticed you now have 5 people on Mount Rushmore, so you better pick.
I know, it's too hard to pick.
Okay, I'll go first.
Andrew always asks these hard questions.
I'll go first while you think about this.
Okay.
So for me, not much of mine. Anytime we're in a world war is very peripheral. So for me, Sound of Music.
Yes.
And Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Okay.
Are the only World War movies I got. Because after this, it goes pretty much into, like, swords and kilts. Braveheart and 300.
Okay. 300?
300.
Oh,
okay.
God.
I am the furthest thing from a Snyder bro.
I know.
But I frigging love 300. I saw it when I was, like, 27 years old. It friggin' ripped. And it still does. And anybody who, like, poo-poos it now, fine. But when that came out in, I don't know, some family holiday weekend like Easter or something, it was so cool. I had to see it twice. And then I, like, you know, it came out around the time that Sin City came out, and the idea of virtual production that The Mandalorian does now has its roots in things like that.
For sure.
Where you have, like, one pile of dirt and you're shooting it from 4 different ways in order to make it look like all of Platea.
Right.
And I think that's phenomenal. So, yeah. Career peaked early, in my opinion. I love 300.
I feel like this is an impossible question to answer also because there are so many wars that have happened and there are so many movies about them. Like, you know, Rome Open City is a brilliant movie. In fact, I would put Rome Open City on my Mount Rushmore.
Uh-oh.
And so...
We're running out of room now.
I know. This is the problem, is I'm like, okay, Rome Open City is amazing. Sophie's Choice, I think, is incredible. Casablanca. And then it gets hard because
because now you have to make a choice.
Because Sound of Music, yes, Sound of Music. Is Sound of Music on there instead of Schindler's List? Even though Schindler's List is more directly about the war?
Well, which one do you like better?
Oh, I like Sound of Music better.
Okay, then probably it's on your Mount Rushmore.
But it's just hard because it's like, I don't know.
I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark is on my...
Yeah, it's true.
Like, watching Nazis melt is always relevant.
Yeah, watching Nazis melt is great. I think we could use more of that, frankly. But I feel like Schindler's List is like honorable mention, and like...
I don't think they have that spot on the mountain.
White Christmas, which is a movie about the war, but not, right? Like...
You just carve them on the back of Mount Rushmore.
But White Christmas to me is not really... It's a Christmas movie more than it is a war movie.
I mean, it's a war movie for like 15 minutes. And then...
No, it's not. Then at the end...
No, then it's a soldier movie.
It's a soldier movie.
It's only a war movie until the war is over, at which point it's a soldier movie.
Okay, Andrew, this is a bigger episode where we debate what a war movie is.
Because Raiders of the Lost Ark is a war movie the whole time.
Is it?
Yeah, it starts in the war, it ends in the war. It's a totally war movie.
It's a totally war
Total
movie.
war. Yeah.
Total war, that's right. Okay, we need to move on from this question. But I'm saying Sophie's Choice, Casablanca, Rome Open City, Sound of Music.
I like your choices.
Are you calling me a snob?
No, they're great choices.
Matt just did a motion with his nose to suggest that I'm a snob. I have a musical on there.
You were so concerned that you weren't going to have like a cinephiles list, and I've got bloody 300 and an indie movie on mine, so don't you worry.
All right, well, okay, we're moving on. This question is very controversial for us. All right, is the opening scene where the American troops storm the beach at Normandy the most intense, anxiety-inducing piece of filmmaking in any war movie? I want to first say that I want this to be the opening scene. Sadly,
it is not.
It is not, and the thing that I think did not age well for me is
Matt Damon aging.
Matt Damon aging is the framing device of old Private Ryan going to the grave, and then we see him again. What was it about the 90s where they were obsessed with slow dissolves from the old person to the young person? Because like in A League of Their Own.
League of Their Own, yeah.
Like,
but remember how Gina Davis, her voice was in the older actor?
Yeah, they did all the voices.
That was crazy.
Yeah, Lori Petty, it was all the, So, first I'm going to say...
That's a war movie.
It is. A League of Their Own is a war movie. Okay, here's the thing. We're stretching it too far. But I will say that I wish it was the opening scene. Is it the most intense and anxiety-inducing piece of filmmaking in any war movie. I mean, I don't think I'm qualified to say that. I will say, because I haven't seen enough war movies to say that, I will say that it is an incredible sequence. The editing is incredible. The sound design is incredible. I've watched some behind-the-scenes clips of, how it was mapped out with ILM in terms of what was practical and what wasn't.
I don't know. I think 1917 might have parts of this beat.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because the fact that you can't edit it
right.
makes you trapped in 1917. And that gives you a kind of anxiety that cuts don't allow.
Yeah. It sounded like you were actually trapped. Like you're go
trapped
through a
in
time
1917.
portal and you're trapped in 1917. I think that it's a brilliant sequence. And I think it is one of the most anxiety-inducing, intense war battles, captured. I was talking to our colleague Andre Rial about it, and he had, he took issue with the fact that actually Canadian troops were the first ones to land,
but
not
at
Omaha Beach,
different beach,
on Normandy Beach. But anyway, we had a big debate about that.
Canadian
Canadians.
troops are so vicious.
We are vicious
that they had to make Geneva Conventions to prevent Canadian behavior. I know, war.
Everyone talks about Canadians like we're so polite and we're so kind.
We're polite till you hand us a bayonet, man.
And then we're pretty vicious.
Yeah,
we need our own war movie about
Vimy Ridge.
Yeah. We should do like a Vimy Ridge movie.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to make it,
just
but
don't tell Paul Gross about it.
Oh boy. So I do remember someone was talking to Tom Hanks. I think it was on that Rosie O'Donnell program or a different interview because, as I said, I was obsessed with this film. And he talked about how, as harrowing as that opening scene is, that Omaha Beach landing is, he actually thinks the battle later, when you've gotten to know all of them, is far more intense. I will say it has some of the best killings I've seen, and that sounds awful, but
great killings.
They are, yeah. But there's some of the most brutal moments of soldiers dying, and you have gotten to know them, and it's more maybe emotionally resonant in that way.
I don't know. I think some of the crazy deaths in Thin Red Line, like Woody Harrelson with his
the
grenade malfunction. There are things in Thin Red Line that I think are more anxiety inducing than this. Partially because having Nick Nolte just telling you to go slaughter all your troops.
Oh yeah, that's wild.
That was just brutal stuff.
I mean, I did learn a lesson. Having watched Thin Red Line, I was like, oh yes, I must remember if I'm ever near a grenade, I should not pull it from there. I mean, you'd think he would know that.
That's basic training shit.
I know, but I guess under pressure.
The thing is, he was fiddling with his pin early in the film, and it's dude, stock. Just run your grenades stock, because whatever it was you did to that grenade did not help anybody.
No. Oh, Woody.
Yeah.
Although I did find that scene slightly ridiculous when he was like, I blew my ass off, or whatever he says.
Yeah.
It's okay, I don't know. It was a little strange. Anyway. Did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director that year? If your answer is no, who would you have given the award to? Can be someone nominated or not. Oh my God. Well, who? This is a good question. 98. We didn't do enough research for this. I mean, I would give Steven Spielberg an Oscar for this.
Yeah, it's
great.
It's a phenomenal one. I certainly, maybe I'm a little 98?
Yeah. Or would have been 99, the Oscars of a 99, I guess.
Yeah, right, of course. I don't know. I think it's pretty phenomenal work. It's groundbreaking work, that's for sure. I mean, I wouldn't give it to Terrence Malick based on the fact that he didn't know how to make that movie. The fact that Bill Pullman was in that movie and Adrian Brody was the star of it, and then he made a 5-hour movie. It feels like a child who didn't know how to make a movie tried to make Thin Red Line, and then it came out great, but was terribly directed.
Honestly,
in that way.
I think I would have given it to Peter Weir for The Truman Show out of the ones who were nominated. Only because I think The Truman Show does something magical And that would just, I mean, because it's the Oscars. Like, I don't know, what's the best achievement in direction? I feel like John Madden, and we're going to get to Shakespeare in Love in a second, also did an incredible job. Like, these are all...
that movie came out beautifully, but is it because the director made that film? I mean, we heard Ed Zwick talk about Shakespeare in Love and the work that went into making that beyond just the one time it was made.
Yes, sure. But, I mean, that's true of many movies. I don't know. I would give it to Spielberg. I would give it to Weir.
Yeah, I think...
Those would be out of the ones who were nominated, that's what I would...
Yeah, I think Spielberg deserves it because of the groundbreaking work in it. And it was entirely his choice to do that way, although he also friggin' chose to incorrectly frame the film, so maybe I'm not right. No, you know what?
Oh, no.
I take it back. I take it back.
Oh, my God, real-time change.
Yes, I just realized it was his choice. He thought that movie was about Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Which is, like, story-wise, simply incorrect. That movie is about Private Ryan's mom. That movie, everything that happens in that movie is because somebody doesn't want Private Ryan's mom to lose all her kids. So the whole through line of that film shouldn't be, make it worth it, Private, make it worth it. That's not the through line of the film. It's, kiss your mama for me, Private. That's what that movie is about.
Or I think Steven Spielberg thinks the movie is about Tom Hanks' character, which is why Private Ryan has so much gratitude to Tom Hanks, to his character, specifically to Tom Hanks. So I just didn't like the way the framing device worked in the film. I don't know that he thought... I think he was pretty clear that it's about Tom Hanks.
But if the very first moment and the very last moment in the film...
But he's going to the grave, right? I guess you don't know that at the beginning. You just see... Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's framed wrong, which I would I would throw that firmly at the feet of the director. So I would say Peter Weir, Truman Show. He knew the movie he was making.
Of the people who were nominated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Outside of that, we'd have to do more research, which we haven't really had
honestly,
time to do.
In 1999, the award for Best Directing should go to Wachowski's.
Yeah.
But I don't think they were... I think they would have been up for the 2000s.
The 2000s, yeah. I mean, 99 was...
an exceptional year for
movies.
movies.
I guess it was 98.
But it was the 98
But both
movies.
of those years were incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Oh, yeah. Movie 25 years ago. I don't want to sound like an old guy here, but 25 years ago, those movies were at a place... Like, this is when Lord of the Rings came out.
Yeah.
Like, 25 years ago was the sweet spot where they were still building huge, expensive things and trying to take a wild shot at whether a movie no one had ever heard of was going to make a bunch of money.
Yeah.
But they could only rely on CGI so much. And now I think we're on the downslope from 1999 being the perfect moment for movies to be made.
It was pretty amazing. Okay, on the 1998 Almanac episode in Season 1, Saving Private Ryan beat Shakespeare in Love, which was the actual Best Picture winner, in the online vote to claim the revised win. Were we and the voters correct in determining this as the best film of 1998? If not, what movie do you think should be considered the best that year and why? I mean, I think Shakespeare in Love rightfully won. I know it's complicated, but Shakespeare in Love is a perfect film. It's an incredible film. As a person who studied Shakespeare and who, lived in the theater world, it is firing on every single cylinder. It's impeccable. I watched it last week and was thoroughly enthralled for the 25th time. So
the Best Picture award is a producer award. And I would say, of the films that were up for that, the producers that made something incredible happen, Shakespeare in Love.
As awful as those producers might be, and some of them are.
Yeah, some of them are trash.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, that movie, they tried to make that movie for a decade.
Yeah.
And those producers got it across the line in a really wonderful way. And I know some people who've worked with Harvey Weinstein, and they all agree that he's an absolute trash human being. But he has a skill around story that doesn't mean he should still be breathing air, but he does have a skill around story.
Well, it's hard. This is one of the biggest issues in our time, right? Is
talented shitbags.
Yeah, now that we are in a time of more accountability and we're learning about all of these people and what they did, and people are having the courage to come forward, we have to decide individually what we will separate and what we won't, and what we will abide. I like that Shakespeare in Love won because I get really irritated that movies about art and love and humor and romance often get
Short shrift.
Before these very serious movies. And I just think that that's an unfortunate side effect of, wanting to award things and wanting to feel that we are discerning, and like there's certainly a sort of a weight to it all.
Well, and I gotta say, as someone who makes movies, anybody who makes a comedy can make a drama. But not anybody who makes a drama can make a comedy.
Yeah.
Comedy is way harder.
It's way harder.
So if you can make some sob story about, any topic under the sun, you're a film student. Congratulations. If you can make people laugh, you are an expert.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, Shakespeare in Love has a degree of complexity, especially in the tone it reaches.
100%.
That none of the other films that year. I mean, maybe The Truman Show. It's a tricky one because you're dealing with rubber-faced Ace Ventura trying to make a serious story.
Good in it.
And that's a very difficult thing to have done as incredibly well as they did. So that's another one where you're striking a difficult tone.
Yeah.
When you've got a comedy person in the lead, and Truman Show does it expertly.
Well, and that was a very controversial thing about that year's Oscars because Life is Beautiful, did very well, and people are very divided about that film. People don't think that there should be a movie that has comedic elements in it about the war, and tell that to Mel Brooks, but I just think I don't know. I appreciate Shakespeare in Love for what it is, and I think it's exceptionally made. You're a fan of Shakespeare in Love, yes?
It's great. I can't stand Gwyneth Paltrow, and I still love that movie.
Well, I mean, I don't really like Gwyneth Paltrow as a person, like her persona in regular life. Certainly not a fan of Goop, but I like her as an actress in a lot of things, and that was sort of her.
That was a sweet spot.
That was her
there.
time, yeah. So Shakespeare in Love was famously pushed by Harvey Weinstein while he was at the height of his power. Should all Weinstein-produced movies retroactively have their places in history removed like college sports does with cheating teams or players? No, it absolutely should not, because a movie is made by hundreds of people who work hard and who are not, awful predators. And so to remove any accolades from those films by association for people who had nothing, it's not like cheating.
Well, yeah, when you're using performance-enhancing drugs, it means the accolade you received isn't rightfully yours in an organic way.
Yeah.
You're not playing by the rules everyone else was. And there are specific rules telling you can't do a thing. The movie industry was started by gangsters and carnies, so you can expect them to have a certain number of dirtbags involved.
I mean, sure, are there, Weinstein, campaigned.
He invented a whole new kind of Oscar campaign,
and it was bullish, and it was it made the whole enterprise different. The Oscars were started as a union-busting exercise to distract people
from their unfair wages and unsafe conditions.
So whenever we treat the Oscars like this venerated, noble thing, I'm like, it's not. It was invented to be. And
to curtail a labor movement.
Yeah. So I don't hold it up to that standard, and so I think
it's also frequently wrong.
It's all the time. I mean, Green Book won an Oscar. Bohemian Rhapsody won an editing Oscar. What are we doing?
Because the editor made the movie.
Yeah, but the editing is terrible.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's for another day. But I don't think that Tom Stoppard, who wrote Shakespeare in Love, should not be part of an Oscar-winning film because Harvey Weinstein was a predator bully. I don't think that that's.
Yeah, I don't think they equate in the way that.
Although we listened to Oscar Wars and they did talk a lot about how railroaded Spielberg's team was and Saving Private Ryan's team was, and all those movies.
They just couldn't keep up with someone who wanted it more.
Yeah.
Weinstein was fighting to win an Oscar in a way no one else was willing to fight to win an Oscar. And then the next year, everybody caught up with Weinstein. It's like they decided, now everybody can do the same performance-enhancing drugs.
It's so bad. It's like, why do the predators and monsters and bullies set the tone, right? It's that thing about
To the victor
world.
belongs the spoils.
Oh no. Careful how much you advocate for this. People are going to think you're...
Guaranteed he's a complete piece of garbage.
Yeah.
But he invented the new way of going for Oscars to the point that people spent like $10 million on an Oscar campaign for a movie that can't even break even. Like, it's a hilarious thing to throw your money into.
It's true. What impact, if any, does the John Williams score have on the emotional journey you take watching the story unfold? I mean, the John Williams score is incredible, and it always has an impact. That's John Williams' gift. I don't find the Saving Private Ryan music in the oeuvre of John Williams scores is the most memorable immediately.
No.
But every time I hear it, it grabs me. And I don't know, I don't think you can separate out John Williams from Steven Spielberg when they work together. Like, the journey you go on is both of them. They are both architects of it.
Yeah, I gotta say, this is one of the more backseat John Williams performances. There's an argument that John Williams is the most influential filmmaker of the 20th and 21st century, and it's pretty easy to hold up that end. But on this one, I don't feel him driving the movie.
No.
In the way that he does in other films.
Yeah, I would agree. The film features a large ensemble cast of actors. What one particular character or performance stands out to you, and why? I have just lost his name in my brain, of course, as we're doing
Vin
this.
Diesel.
Not Vin Diesel. Good Lord. No, he's not part of the family. I would say the actor who plays the translator. So I think actually the most interesting journey that anyone goes on in the film is that character. Because he begins as an interpreter, translator, working in a tent, not on the front lines. He gets roped in because they need somebody who speaks French and German. He has to learn so much throughout the movie. He goes through the biggest shift, and he goes from a person who wants them to set the German prisoner free, to send him to the POW camp, and not shoot him when all of the other soldiers want to kill him, to watching that very same soldier kill people he has grown to love and care about, and then shooting. Like, it's where he ends up ethically and morally, and how complicated that is, and how badly you feel about it, to me, is the most interesting part of the film.
The one that stands out the most to me is the actor who plays old Matt Damon, because he shouldn't be in the movie.
I love how I go to all this trouble to explain the mechanism, and you're like, joke. Amazing. Is this the closest a Vin Diesel performance ever got to being in consideration for an Academy Award nomination? I have not seen a lot of Vin Diesel films. I have stayed away from the Furious
I'd give it to him for every one of the Pitch Black movies before this.
I mean, he's not in this movie very much.
Exactly.
So is it the closest? I don't know. I think Vin Diesel's going to surprise us all.
I'd give it to him for the first of the Riddick movies.
Yeah.
He's really great in that. He's great in all the Riddick movies. I
haven't seen any Riddick movies. I don't know. Vin Diesel's really just not in my wheelhouse, I guess.
I gotta watch more Vin. The Vin is in.
The Vin is in. Does Saving Private Ryan do a good job of telling the story of World War II through an authentic historical lens, or is it in any way a victim of being considered American war propaganda? Every American war movie, to some extent,
is American war propaganda.
Oh, you know what I just realized?
What?
I forgot. I have to revise
what?
my Mount Rushmore.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I have to revise my Mount Rushmore.
What? You want a Lenny Riefenstahl film on there?
Oh my God, Matt.
Talking about propaganda?
No, propaganda. Propaganda made me think of it. No, Zone of Silence.
Oh, no, right.
Right? Like, for me, man, see, this is the thing about war movies, is it becomes...
So what's your four?
My four is Sophie's Choice, Zone of Interest. Did I say Zone of Silence?
You did.
Zone of Interest is what I meant. Rome Open City, Sound of Music.
Nice. Good choice.
Zone of Interest is incredible. I think Zone of Interest is one of the most emotionally intense,
anxiety-ridden
movies.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah.
Okay, so officially, I'm saying Sophie's Choice, Zone of Interest, Sound of Music, Rome Open City.
Yeah, and again, that's the anxiety and the sound design are so intertwined in that film.
I love that made me think of that
Which question was it that made you
This
think of
one
that?
about propaganda. Because
Oh,
I was like, what are movies not made by America, and are they propaganda? And I was like, I feel like almost every American war movie, because especially World War II movies that are made by Americans, it's very complicated for us as Canadians because we were in the war
When it was bad, and
before.
Americans were like, "Oh darn, I guess we should be involved now."
So this is maybe a sticky question for us because I think that
It does feel like American war propaganda to me.
Yeah, I mean, especially the Spielberg-y kind of sentimentality of it,
And especially after watching Thin Red Line.
Yeah.
Like, that is a pacifist's war movie.
Yes, for sure.
There's nothing glorified about the terrible things that happen in war, even when they win in Thin Red Line. Even in the moments of triumph, you're like, oh man, this is brutal. And I feel like everybody friggin' dies in Saving Private Ryan, but it still is done in this like glory and valor in death kind of way.
Yeah. I think one of its issues as well is it doesn't give enough context. Too much of Saving Private Ryan upon rewatch is the same repeated beat of, hey, why do we have to do it for this one guy? I'm not here to just save this one guy. I'm not risking my life for this one guy. And I'm like, but you're going to be in a battle one way or another.
You're risking your life for this war. Yeah.
So what's the difference? Why wouldn't you?
This is the task.
I don't think that's mined enough. I think they just kind of let that be for far too long. And the answer from Tom Hanks's character is, if this gets me out of here, I want out of here. I don't know. I don't think it's an authentic historical lens necessarily from the characterization. I think from the battle side of things, I think from the Omaha Beach, I think that sequence might be some of the most authentic representation of what it would have maybe felt like.
Certainly from what some of the vets who watched it had to say. They said this was a very authentic.
Yeah. Well, see, I mean,
that
again,
scene
I'm not,
in particular.
Yeah.
The rest of the movie, I don't know.
I can't say.
It feels propaganda-ish to me.
I feel like a lot of war movies are.
Oh yeah, that's what they're mostly for.
Yeah.
They're very rare. Like, there's not a lot of Terrence Malick's making war movies.
No.
Like, the Zone of Interest really examines it.
Yeah.
And Terrence Malick in Thin Red Line really examines it.
Yeah.
I would call it another really cinematically powerful piece of war propaganda.
Interesting. Ooh. This is a spicy end to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I need to watch more movies about wars.
I guess Top Gun is a war movie.
Yeah, it's not going to be on my
Rushmore.
Rushmore.
The thing is, America's been at war for most of the back half of the 20th century. So most things about soldiers at all would be some kind of war.
That's true. Well, we watched Glory the other night.
Glory was pretty great. Would that be on? I don't think it would. Matthew Broderick really.
It would not at all be on
that movie.
My Rushmore.
I feel like
Civil War movies aren't really my vibe.
I liked Glory, but unfortunately, as like electric as Denzel's performance is, then it's a Matthew Broderick scene that happens next.
Here's the thing. Again, I go back to this war movie thing because Hotel Rwanda is an incredible movie.
Gladiator.
That's about a war.
Gladiator is a war movie.
Yeah, like it's the parameters are just too big for me. We could be here for hours, but we won't do that.
War is a pretty cool subject. People like it for stories.
What is it good for?
Cinema.
Oh no! Terrible. Sorry, Andrew. Okay. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, that's our take. Thanks for letting me crash.
You're welcome, Matt. Thanks for crashing.
Whee!
Spirited debate.
Hello, Revisionist Almanac. I am CineKyle. You can hear me on my weekly podcast, Cinemillennials. Find us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. You can find me on X at Cine_Kyle. And the podcast page is just at Cinemillennials on X. Also, you can find me at CineKyle on Letterboxd. I'm here to talk about Saving Private Ryan, so we're just going to dive right into it. What are your memories of seeing the movie for the first time? I was probably way too young to see it. I couldn't have been much more than 9 or 10 years old, but through my grandfather, I always had a fascination with war films, and it was one that my stepfather had the double VHS set that I would always see on our movie shelf, and I was never allowed to watch it until, I don't know, it was like we were home from school one day. I don't know if it was because we were sick or if it was a snow day, but my stepbrother and I finally watched it. He threw it on, and it was just under the pretense that if you watch this, you don't get to tell anybody about it. And it was a little heavy. For like I said, only 9 or 10 years old. I just had no idea what I was watching. I had never seen a film like that, especially with the opening scene. I loved it from that day forward. I was always a very big fan of snipers in the military, so an immediate favorite character was Barry Pepper's Private Jackson, which is just funny to think back on now because he has such a small part, but for a young CineKyle, it was extremely influential. How do you think Saving Private Ryan compares to the other notable World War II film from 1998, Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line? I myself prefer Saving Private Ryan, but I still appreciate The Thin Red Line. It's due for a rewatch. I have not seen the film in some years. They both have incredibly strong casts, and the best way I could compare the two is that Saving Private Ryan is about the experience of war, whereas The Thin Red Line is about the meaning of it. What I mean with that is, Spielberg is showing you what war feels like, whereas Malick is asking you what war means. They are both excellent films. I do have Saving Private Ryan above Thin Red Line, but Thin Red Line is one that I think if it was released in a different year, it probably wouldn't have been as overshadowed as it was in the sense of being released in the same year as Saving Private Ryan. What is your Mount Rushmore of films dealing with war? Number one is I've got to put it on here, Saving Private Ryan. It would be silly to not have it on here. So nothing I need to really explain there for that one. We all know why we're here for Saving Private Ryan. Number two would be Glory from 1989, directed by Edward Zwick. It's a Civil War film. Matthew Broderick plays captain of the first all-black volunteer company during the Civil War. Denzel Washington received an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor in this role. It's a powerful film, and it's probably my favorite Civil War film. This is one that I really love, and some great performances and good messaging as well. 3 would be Platoon from 1986, directed by Oliver Stone. It is a chilling depiction of the Vietnam War and the struggles of dealing with conflicting ideologies. It's a huge cast. It's a great cast. I love a war film that grapples with the realness of it. Platoon was always one that is just a very raw film, and it doesn't hold any punches. The last film that I would put on the Mount Rushmore of war films is The Zone of Interest from 2023, directed by Jonathan Glazer. It may be interesting to put this on, but I feel like it's one of the most important films made in the last 5-10 years. The picture it paints without ever actually showing you what it's painting is extremely powerful. And I recommend anyone who has any interest in World War II or the Holocaust, anything like that, it's a necessary film to watch. It's horrifying and quite beautiful all at the same time, in its own way. And really an incredible piece of filmmaking. Is the opening scene where the American troops storm the beach at Normandy the most intense, anxiety-inducing piece of filmmaking in any war movie? I would just say yes. I have yet to see a film that leads with such a punch. It's 7 minutes in, and you are just completely entrenched in warfare. Things are all over the place, from explosions to blood, body parts. Just really incredible choice to lead a movie with that. Nothing really comes to mind that holds a candle to what Saving Private Ryan did with that. Did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director that year? I'm just going to go ahead and say yes. I can't think of anyone else that would have been close for the achievement that this was. Not just for war films, but just filmmaking in general. I do believe Steven Spielberg was deserving of that Oscar. On the 1998 Almanac episode in Season 1, Saving Private Ryan beat Shakespeare in Love, the actual Best Picture winner, and the online vote to claim the revised win. Were we and the voters correct in determining this as the best film of 1998? I do believe it is the best, but only by a slim margin over The Big Lebowski and The Truman Show. If you want to get into Oscar politics, I believe Saving Private Ryan should have been the Best Picture winner, so I do believe that's right. But if we're talking about just best film overall, it really is hard to have this conversation without mentioning Lebowski and Truman Show, which are both also iconic films. In general, what do you think of Shakespeare in Love as a movie, separating it from its Best Picture win entirely? I haven't seen Shakespeare in Love, so I don't have an opinion on this one. It's on my list to watch. I've obviously heard the more negative things around it, but I haven't seen it, and I will get around to it eventually. Shakespeare in Love was famously pushed by Harvey Weinstein while he was at the height of his power in Hollywood. Should all Weinstein-produced movies retroactively have their places in history removed, like college sports does with cheating teams, players, etc.? This is a tough one. I don't believe complete removal is the answer, because although they are Weinstein productions, there are a lot of innocent people that have their legacies taken away because of this man. And obviously his actions are horrible and he should face punishment for this. But I would say, take his name off of it, do something. But to take the legacy from the film completely, you create a lot of casualties of war, if you will, with that. A lot of strays, a lot of innocents that worked on these films. It's hard to have the conversation because we do not condone anything that was done, but there's a lot of other people involved. It's just very tough. I don't think complete removal is the answer, but I would be supportive of something happening to have his name taken out of it. What impact, if any, does the John Williams score have on the emotional journey you take watching the story unfold? The impact of the score, which is a beautiful score, by the way, but the impact is that it guides the journey. And I think what's more powerful than the score itself is the choices they make to have the absence of it. The silence in this film is executed perfectly. It only happens a couple times. It's a very loud, very emotional film. But if you pay attention and you catch the moments of silence, I think they executed that very, very well. And I think that piece of it just makes the score that much better. The lack thereof in the scenes where it makes sense. The film features a large ensemble cast of characters. What one particular character or performance stands out to you and why? I went with Tom Hanks as Captain Miller. I've just always loved how trustworthy he feels. He's a guy doing a job so that he can get back home to his wife. My favorite scene of his is probably the reveal of him being a school teacher. And then he goes into a bit of a monologue, and the line that always has stuck with me is, I just know that every man I kill, the farther away from home I feel. It's just a very powerful performance. I don't think there's anything that really blows you away with Tom Hanks as Captain Miller, but just an excellent piece, and he's an easy guy to root for. He's the type of captain that you would want to fight for, and I think they did a great job of conveying that on screen. Is this the closest a Vin Diesel performance ever got to being in consideration for an Academy Award nomination? I guess technically, but if we're going to start throwing around Vin Diesel Academy Award nominations, I think we should be including The Iron Giant. That's a personal favorite performance of his, of mine. Maybe let's put some respect on The Iron Giant. Does Saving Private Ryan do a good job of telling the story of World War II through an authentic historical lens, or is it in any way a victim of being considered American war propaganda? I think it's definitely a bit of column A and a bit of column B. The authenticity and the depictions definitely seem accurate, and it is emotionally gripping, but there are definitely the hoorah, America's number one elements that they sprinkle in. I don't think it's overpowering in the film, but it definitely exists. And I think maybe part of that is because it's very hard to make a World War II film in this way without, a bit of propaganda, as it was just everywhere. Obviously, the example I gave earlier with The Zone of Interest, that's a World War II film that I don't believe is any propaganda at all. It can be done, but I think it's difficult. So I think Saving Private Ryan is a bit of a victim of that, where it can be considered propaganda. And that is everything. Thanks for the opportunity to collaborate, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with.
How's it going, everybody, over at the Revisionist Almanac? And Andrew, once again, thank you so much for inviting me to collab on another cool project, which of course we are all talking about Saving Private Ryan. Now, a little bit about me before I get into the questions. I am Morgan. I am the creator and the founder of the Hall of Film, which is a community voted Hall of Fame where we induct and honour directors, actors, actresses, and of course films. It's a YouTube channel that you can go right now and search and check out, but it's also now a podcast where we get people on, they choose a film or person to talk about, and we do a big deep dive on their chosen person or film. So yeah, go give that a look over. And you can find me over on all the socials at Lone Wolf Mojo. And yeah, of course, we are talking about Saving Private Ryan. And the first question that Andrew asks is, what are your memories of seeing the movie for the first time? And it's actually quite funny, because when I signed up to do this, I told Andrew at the time that I had actually never seen Saving Private Ryan, which I know that's pretty bad, but I feel like everybody's got a never-ending watch list of films that they've not seen that they always say they'll get to, but they never do because the list keeps expanding. This was one of those films. I am somebody who enjoys watching war films, but it has to be done right for me to enjoy or find interesting. And Saving Private Ryan is a very well done war film. Of course, you would expect that directed by the great Steven Spielberg, and with the cast as well, they are all on their top form. The score is great, the story is great, and it's just a really, really well made film. The second question that Andrew asks is, how do you think that Saving Private Ryan compares to the other notable World War II film in 1998, which of course was Terence Macklin's The Thin Red Line. Now, I'm going to say something which sounds kind of hilarious, but bear with me. I think out of the two, Saving Private Ryan is quite an easy watch, which I know is crazy to say. But the reason I say that is because Terence Macklin's The Thin Red Line is akin to something like Come and See and some other films where it's not about the war, it's about what the war does to the people. And those are the kind of war films that really, really grab me and my attention. Not to say that Saving Private Ryan doesn't explore all of that, because of course it does, but I think that The Thin Red Line's whole idea and concept is about what that war, what the environment does to those young men, and I just think it's a great exploration of that. I think Saving Private Ryan's more your like big blockbuster war piece rather than an full in-depth exploratory piece, which is absolutely fine, and that's what I appreciate about both of these films coming out in the same year. You get both a blockbuster, deep, quite gruesome war film, but you also get an extremely deep look of just what war does to people. So I think the comparisons are very close and also far apart at the same time. The next question, this was a tough one, is what is your Mount Rushmore of films dealing with war? And it was tough but also easy at the same time for me, because I do have two that are definitely there for the end of time for me, which is Come and See, which for me is not only the best war film, best anti-war film, it's one of the best films that I have ever seen. It is haunting, it is incredible. If you've somehow not watched it, go on YouTube, type in Come and See, and the full film is actually on YouTube for you to watch right now, which I highly recommend anybody checks it out. The next film on that list that is always going to be there is Schindler's List. Again, it's a great, not so much about the war, about the violence and everything. It's just, again, an exploratory piece on a very important person in the war and the incredible things that he did to save so many. And it is deep, it is incredible, has amazing performances from Liam Neeson and Ray Fiennes. The next I've written down on this list is actually Saving Private Ryan, because sometimes with a war film you don't want always deep and depressing and heavy subjects. You also want all out action and chaos, and Saving Private Ryan, as I previously mentioned, smack bang in the sweet spot of it gets deep, it gets heavy, but it's also just an all-out action war film. So that makes my list. And then the fourth, I was debating to put The Thin Red Line on, or 1917, which is an awesome film as well. But I've gone with Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. I think, again, a great exploratory piece. What I really like about Dunkirk, it's focused on not just one set of people. It focuses on sea, land and air, which often I feel people forget that the war was fought in the ocean and in the air, not just on the ground. And again, it's filled with great performances. It's directed masterfully, and I just really think that's a high quality, well made film. The next question is, did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director that year? And if the answer is no, who would I have give that to? And I do think, looking at 98, that I probably would have give Spielberg the win. The other films that year do have some of my favourite, The Truman Show and The Big Lebowski being two of them. But in terms of direction, again, Could anybody make Saving Private Ryan? I think the answer is no. Not to the quality that Spielberg made it. I do think there are some other directors throughout time that could have directed it as well, but it's a very, very short list. So no, I don't think I would have given it anybody else. I think Spielberg deserved the best director that year. The next question was on the 98 Almanac episode in season 1. Saving Private Ryan beat Shakespeare in Love, which of course actually won the best picture in the online vote to claim the revised win. Were we and the voters correct in determining this as the best film of 98? If not, what movie do you think should be considered the best that year and why? And again, if I'm taking my biases out and I'm looking at that year objectively, I probably do come to the conclusion that Saving Private Ryan is the best film of that year. My other ones that I would put in there is American Society X, which I think is a great film, The Truman Show, as I mentioned, and The Big Lebowski. So, taking my biases out, Saving Private Ryan is the best film that year, and everybody was correct in voting that. Putting my bias in, I would say The Big Lebowski or The Truman Show is the best of that year. I constantly go back to those and have an amazing time, and I find something else in both of those each time I revisit it. And if you've somehow not seen The Truman Show or The Big Lebowski, please do yourself a favour and give it a watch. And finally, the last question is an interesting one because I don't feel I can answer it because I've not watched the film yet, and it is, in general, what do you think of Shakespeare in Love as a movie, separating it from the its best picture win entirely? Now, when I was looking through, I was like researching. I was like, okay, I'll watch The Thin Red Line. That interests me. Watched it, and it did. When I was researching then for Shakespeare in Love, that did not interest me in the slightest. I was like, okay, that's that. You know, I feel like in the 90s, the Academy were like, well, we have to put a period piece in. It feels like that was the decade of the period piece. I don't think it's a movie that I will come out looking at favourably, especially consider in my brain I'll be thinking, this won Best Picture over, you know, Saving Private Ryan, American History X, you know, The Truman Show, The Big Lebowski, all these great films from that year, and that was the Academy's decision of what was the best film of that year. So yeah, I don't think I'll come out looking favourable on Shakespeare in Love. But that is it from me. That is my rundown of the questions. That is my opinion on Saving Private Ryan. And yeah, thank you again, Andrew, for the opportunity. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I will no doubt see you all on Andrew's podcast again in the very near future.
Andrew, Revisionist Almanac fans, my name is Darin. I'm the co-host of the NostalgiaCast podcast, as well as the Back to Bluey podcast. You can find me on Twitter at DW Lundberg. You can also find me on Blue Sky at dwlundberg.bsky.social. I am also on YouTube under NostalgiaCast. Just chiming in on the Saving Private Ryan retrospective. Just going to go ahead and read the questions again. Thank you very much for the invite to participate in this. What are your memories of seeing Saving Private Ryan for the first time? Well, it was 1998. That was the summer that my wife and I started dating. I know that Spielberg had this and The Mask of Zorro both out in theaters within a couple weeks, and I think Saving Private Ryan probably sucked all the air out of the room. I also remember sitting in the theater, and during the ads, one of them said, "Hey kids, get your courtesy soda every Tuesday," and the whole audience just started cracking up because they obviously knew what movie they were, an R-rated movie they were sitting in for. My biggest memory of watching the movie is that, like Schindler's List, the audience sat silent and stunned the whole time. I don't think anybody was prepared for the level of artistry or violence or emotion that was unfolding in front of them. Number 2, how do you think Saving Private Ryan compares to the other notable WW2 film from 1998, Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line? First of all, let me just say that they're both masterworks. I deeply enjoy both movies. However, they couldn't be, other than the fact that they're set in World War II, they couldn't be any different. Saving Private Ryan is about the sacrifice and the horror of war, while Thin Red Line is about the horror of war as unleashed upon nature and how abhorrent it is to the beauty of that and the destruction that it causes. Thin Red Line is obviously much more meditative, while Saving Private Ryan is more visceral. Like I said, both masterworks, both saying different things about the war, couldn't be completely different. Number 3, what is your Mount Rushmore for films dealing with war? Well, typically the kind of person that I am, I like to organize things by categories. And so if I was to organize like a top 4 war films, I would definitely organize them per war, like the type of war that's represented, the time period, all that, just to give you an overview of the best possible version. Like if you want to learn about the Civil War, World War I, or World War II, or Vietnam, you want to watch one particular movie, that's what I would do. So for the Civil War, I would pick Glory, an Edward Zwick movie. Definitely, it's basically a white savior movie, but it's also so inspirational and so powerful. Just seeing all, the men come together, both men of color and men of, not so much color, just kind of combining their strengths and their courage to make a difference in the war and fight for freedom that means something to them. For World War I was going to pick the Lewis Milestone film, All Quiet on the Western Front from 1931. This is the movie that set the standard for all other war films that followed, like the template about the soldier, the young innocent soldier that goes off to war, fights in the battle, gets disillusioned, comes home, finds out that he's not the same person that he was. It's the template that's reached all the way from, again, 1931 all the way down to the Catherine Bigelow movie, The Hurt Locker. It's the same basic plot, just transported to a different war. So again, very powerful movie, but it's also, like I said, it set the template for everything. World War II, I would obviously pick Saving Private Ryan. Again, it depicts the horrors of war so realistically and with zero punches pulled that I think nobody was quite prepared for. I think everybody was more John Wayne kind of centric when they thought of war films. We'll come back to that. And then my 4th film for Mount Rushmore, I would definitely pick Apocalypse Now. Francis Ford Coppola captured that hallucinatory nature of war and how we felt so disillusioned because we had no business shoving our noses in there where we didn't belong. We paid the price for it. But also, I think it's fascinating that the making of the movie kind of mimics the craziness. Like, what are we doing? What are we even putting together? And so it's a very, like I said, hallucinatory film, but so very powerful in the way that it's directed. It might be one of the greatest American directed films of all time. Number 4 is the opening scene where the American troops storm the beach at Normandy, the most intense / anxiety-inducing piece of filmmaking in any war movie. 100%. Like I kind of hinted at before, Private Ryan, before this movie, war is depicted as like a raw entertainment with John Wayne or Gary Cooper leading us in a glorious battle. War was never as terrifying or unforgiving as it is in Saving Private Ryan. The way that Spielberg and Kaminsky employed handheld, color drain, shaky cam to give us like a newsreel, you were there sensation. It felt so invigorating, so horrifying, and it's been copied in war films ever since. I think the violence is so shocking that it really just stunned the audience that I was in, stunned them into silence. But also you watch any YouTuber react to the movie and they're kind of taken aback by how violent and how emotional just those first 15 minutes are. Like the way that they view movies has changed after those first 15 minutes. You can see it in their faces. I know that the violence was so intense that the MPAA wanted to rate it X, but Spielberg rightly argued that none of the violence was a glorification of that. And I think what's so powerful about that is seeing the way bodies are decimated and seeing the destruction that's brought upon these innocent guys. Spielberg's depiction felt so real that the families of veterans who never talked about their experiences because they were so shattering to them, suddenly the family members understood everything that their grandfathers, fathers, uncles, everybody that had gone through that war, they finally understood what they'd experienced. And I think that's the magic of movies, is being able to show you something like that. Number 5, did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director that year? If your answer is no, who would you have given the award to? 100% Spielberg deserved this. I think we can argue on whether the movie itself deserved to win Best Picture. I'm not big on Oscar, as I've said before, but the visual storytelling, just in that D-Day sequence alone, is so stunningly directed. And if, say, Spielberg had lost the award to anybody else, I think I would have lost more respect for Oscar voters, even less than I have today. Again, that D-Day sequence, the way that we sense the soldiers' nervousness when they're on those boats, and then chaos erupts, chaos reigns. We're trying to get our bearings. We slowly start to pick up on faces and strategies and objectives until they finally take that beach. The visual storytelling for that, and that might be the greatest example of Spielberg's unnatural command of that camera in a career full of films that could also stake that claim. Number 6, on the 1998 Almanac episode in season 1, Saving Private Ryan beat Shakespeare in Love, which was the actual Best Picture winner, in an online vote to claim the revised win. Were we and the voters correct in determining this is the best film of 1998? If not, what do you think should be considered the best that year and why? First of all, voters are never actually correct, in quotations, right? It's all subjective. Oscar is rarely, if ever, a prognosticator of what will stand the test of time, what will influence other films and filmmakers, what will have the most impact on the industry, and on and on and on. Private Ryan, in my mind, unequivocally had the most impact that year. So many films and so many filmmakers have tried to ape its style and storytelling, have tried to copy that emotion. The movie itself makes such a strong statement about the horrors of war that all other war films have felt pointless to me since. They just haven't been able to reach that same level of artistry. And you'd watch Saving Private Ryan going, how's anybody going to match this? And nobody has. Number 7, in general, what do you think of Shakespeare in Love as a movie, separating it from its Best Picture win entirely? On NostalgiaCast, we covered Shakespeare in Love for our 90s Palooza season. I think Shakespeare in Love, regardless of awards, regardless of the reputation, it's a funny, romantic, richly detailed film that still works beautifully as entertainment today. That Tom Stoppard screenplay is just so awesome, from the detail of, all the arguments about whether Shakespeare actually existed. And one of the ideas for proof is, he signed his name different ways. And just in that first 5 minutes, you see Joseph Fiennes practicing his signature, which kind of lays that whole controversy to rest. I thought that was just so beautifully handled. So again, it works as a great romantic, rich entertainment, but it's still nowhere near as impactful as Saving Private Ryan. Number 8, Shakespeare in Love was famously pushed by Harvey Weinstein while he was at the height of his power in Hollywood. Should all Weinstein-produced movies retroactively have their places in history removed, like college sports does with cheating teams, players, etc.? No. It is what it is. We all need to move on. Number 9, what impact, if any, does the John Williams score have on the emotional journey you take watching the story unfold? Williams' music score it's absent for a lot of the film, and I think that's the correct choice. When the music kind of seeps in, especially after the D-Day sequence, you wake up, you're like, oh yeah, I'm watching a movie. It reminds you of the moviness of it, right? I think that the emotions and the drama on display and the acting, everything about the movie speaks for itself. I think if you were to add extra score from what we heard on top of that, I think the extra Mickey Mousing would basically make it a little too unbearable. It's mostly ambient stuff, but that Hymn to the Fallen, which is the signature piece of the movie, it's a genuinely beautiful piece of work. And whenever I listen to it, I just kind of get reverent about it and sit and listen. Number 10, the film features a large ensemble cast of actors. What one particular character performance stands out to you and why? So I think that the entire cast of Saving Private Ryan is uniformly strong. Even Vin Diesel isn't bad. And I love that the cast is peppered with veteran actors like Ted Danson, Bryan Cranston, Dennis Farina, Paul Giamatti. It wakes you up whenever they pop up on screen. But it's undoubtedly Hanks that wins the movie for me. He really leans into a stalwart, morally upright, Jimmy Stewart-esque American value persona. And he makes it so clear by doing that it's everyday men that fought in the war and were hardened by it. There are 2 moments especially that make me bawl like no other movie since Schindler's List. There's a moment after Wade has been killed, the medic's been killed, and Miller, because it was his decision to launch that attack, he goes off on his own where his men can't see him, and he just breaks down sobbing, and he can't stop himself. Again, we're seeing that even the most stalwart men can be emotionally wrecked by their experience there. And seeing Tom Hanks, someone we look up to as like a pinnacle of goodness, seeing him break down uncontrollably is so heartbreaking. And then that second moment, the whole movie, we keep getting a shot of his trembling hand because whatever physical ailment he has or the experience he has. After his death, after he tells Ryan, earn this, when the camera pans down and we see that his hand, which has, again, been spasming all movie long, when we finally see that it's at rest and still, I lose it. I just start bawling. And I'm a wreck from then until the end of the movie. So again, just Oscars are weird because I think Tom Hanks gives a better performance in this than he gave in Forrest Gump or Philadelphia. But because he already won for Philadelphia and Forrest Gump, Oscar was not going to give him this award. And it's sad to me. Number 11, is this the closest a Vin Diesel performance ever got to being in consideration for an Academy Award nomination? I mean, I guess so. It might be his most respectful, but even his performance as Caparzo, it's not award worthy in the slightest. And they get rid of him pretty quickly. Number 12, does Saving Private Ryan do a good job of telling the story of World War II through an authentic historical lens, or is it in any way a victim of being considered American war propaganda? I'm sure everybody who's supplied like a summary or a remembrance of Saving Private Ryan for this project, I'm sure everybody's said this, but Francois Truffaut famously said that there's no such thing as an anti-war film because every war film will glorify the experience in one way or another. And to a point, I do agree with that. Even look at Apocalypse Now, the Ride of the Valkyrie scene, the way that it's filmed gets you pumped, gets you excited because of the filmmaking, because of the sound design. But the soldiers, American soldiers, are literally attacking a Viet Cong village full of innocent people. And so I don't know anybody that could watch Apocalypse Now and go, yeah, that looks like fun. But I also can't imagine anyone watching Saving Private Ryan, seeing the carnage, seeing the terror on everybody's faces, seeing, again, the destruction given to everybody's bodies. I can't imagine anybody watching that and saying to themselves, yeah, I'd like to have bits and pieces of me blown off for freedom. You know what I mean? It's a hard choice. Obviously, the men that were out there, all those countless soldiers that died, they fought for something bigger than who we are, and that's to be admired. But again, the point of Saving Private Ryan is to show you the terror that's kind of rained down on these people because of their experiences there. So again, Saving Private Ryan, masterful film. Again, Andrew, I thank you for the invitation to participate in this project. Again, my name is Darin Lundberg, and again, you can reach me on Twitter to complain about anything I've said. You can reach me on Blue Sky or YouTube. Thank you again.
Hello, all you wonderful Revisionist Almanac listeners. This is Mike from CineMusts chiming in and honored to be invited for this collaboration on Saving Private Ryan. So a couple questions to get through here. I'll dive right into it. Question 1, what are your memories of seeing the movie for the first time? What's funny is I actually don't have very distinct memories of the first time I actually watched the movie. My memories of it are largely like when I was first aware of it because I was in grade school when it came out and there was all this talks around. I remember like my parents and their friends from the neighborhood like being in the kitchen like talking about it and how it was too brutal to watch and just all the carnage and everything, and I was like always fascinated by that. But like that had been built up so much I can't even like distinctly remember the first time I'd actually watched it because like everything I'd been told about it just kind of like delivered on that. So that's kind of a weird thing for a movie I like so much that I don't have a distinct memory of when I first saw it, but it was just kind of like always built up in my mind just from hearing about it from such a young age. So I guess that's what I got for question 1. Question 2, how do I think Saving Private Ryan compares to other notable World War II films from 1998, Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line? So usually I'll actually watch these two in tandem. Whenever I watch one, I kind of have to watch the other. I have grown to like The Thin Red Line more over the years. I like it a little more every time I see it. I'm still not like a huge fan of Thin Red Line. It's pretty far from my favorite Terrence Malick movie. It's a little too philosophical for me. I have this weird thing with it where like it does seem like a theater of combat would be the perfect place for people to ruminate on all sorts of philosophical questions about mortality and nature and all that, but it like the delivery just doesn't make it. But I will say, as much as I'm not like a huge fan of the movie, I really love just this dichotomy that in the same year there were these two movies that are so diametrically opposed to each other, but they create this great dialogue that, Thin Red Line has, very lush, colorful, steady cinematography. It's very staged. It's a lot more philosophical and poetic. It takes place in a different theater of war. And so, juxtaposing that with Saving Private Ryan with kind of the gritty documentarian style of cinematography, that it takes place in Europe, that it's really playing up the violence, where Thin Red Line largely downplays it. I think like it's great that those two are linked together, being in the same year, being in the same Academy Awards race. Like, I will always forever love that and would never hold it against anybody who prefers Thin Red Line to Saving Private Ryan, because I think they both bring such unique takes on kind of the same idea to the table. So question 3 is going to be hard. My Mount Rushmore of films dealing with war, any war. And this is tricky because when you ask the Mount Rushmore question, I always have to consider, like, it's not necessarily about my favorites. It's, you have 4 slots to kind of represent core ideas around a topic. So, for me, Private Ryan is going to make the list. I think what it, brought in terms of not just like showing the brutality of war, but also kind of demystifying this particular war that on the surface it's about, the veneer of brotherhood and camaraderie. But I think a lot of it is about, kind of stripping that away. I think before Private Ryan, my number 1 slot that I put there is Apocalypse Now. To me, that's kind of the ultimate war movie, really delving into, the bureaucracy, the futility, the brutality, the human nature, all that. I'm a gigantic fan of Apocalypse Now. But then my other 2 spots would probably not go to movies that I'd necessarily say are my favorite war movies, but I think my third one would go to the original All Quiet on the Western Front, which I think you can look at now, and it does seem very quaint that the core theme of that movie is like that war is not that great, and people who see it as this adventure that glorifies like your nation, that's all a lie. But I think just, for that movie to be produced by Universal, for it to have like that veneer of a studio movie I think it's like a really gutsy movie. And so it's kind of like one of those forerunners. And I think like on a Mount Rushmore pick, you kind of have to have one of the ancestors, one of like the first ones to crash through the wall. And then my 4th slot, like, a movie I have real mixed feelings on, but I think I'd give it to Braveheart just to showcase the medieval warfare element. I think that the battle scenes in Braveheart are pretty exceptional. And, the movie, we can do an episode on Braveheart someday. I have mixed feelings about the movie's take on, honor, loyalty, patriotism, and all that. But I think, as a war movie, it's quite good. So I think those are going to be my 4 on the Mount Rushmore of war films: Apocalypse Now, Saving Private Ryan, All Quiet on the Western Front, and Braveheart. Next question is the opening scene where the American troops storm the beach at Normandy, the most intense / anxiety-inducing piece of filmmaking in any war movie. I mean, it's got to be up there. It's like the keystone piece. It's kind of like the one part of the movie everybody kind of agrees was great. Even detractors of the movie didn't have like much crosstalk against that, just because of the handheld camera, how much you feel like you're there, you're down in the water, you're seeing the blood, you're kind of marching with the Americans up the hill. You don't really get a view of Germans except for vaguely behind the trigger and the machine guns and all that. So it's pretty effective at really making you feel like you're there as much as you possibly can. I'd cite like other stuff that fills me equally with as much anxiety. A lot of Apocalypse Now does, just because of like the nature of the small crew on the boat kind of venturing into hostile territory where you don't know what's behind those trees. But I would still say even that, I think that the D-Day sequence from Saving Private Ryan would have to take the cake in terms of just intensity and, inducing anxiety. It's very good at what it does. So I got to give it the win. And speaking of the win, question 5, did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director that year? And if the answer is no, who would you have given it? I'm not going to answer no, because I do believe he deserved this award. There's a lot of really great movies that year, but I think this was a pretty great vision. He pulled it off. I think it's, not one of my top 5 favorites of his, but it's dang near close. So I think, in terms of ones that you could give it to him, no question, this one is pretty close to the top for me. So not going to be taking gold out of Spielberg's hand, which you guys didn't either. Question 6 on the 1998 Almanac episode in season 1, Saving Private Ryan beat Shakespeare in Love, the actual Best Picture winner in the online vote, and claimed the revised win. Were we and the voters correct in determining this as the best film of 98? And if not, what do you think should be considered the best that year and why? I voted in this poll, and I stand by that. I also voted for Saving Private Ryan as best movie that year, so I don't really have anything that I think should have beaten it. But a lot of stuff I love was also represented. Truman Show I think definitely deserves to be up there. Big Lebowski, very underrated. Nobody knew what to do with that movie at its time, but I think it's kind of gone on to prove it, like what an exceptional comedy it is. So. There's definitely things that I think, needed to be revised in terms of what was nominated, but I've got no beef with Saving Private Ryan actually winning, because I contributed to this vote. So clearly, I'm happy with the results. Speaking of results, number 7, in general, what do I think of Shakespeare in Love as a movie, separating it from the Best Picture win entirely? I kind of feel like that's the best way to view Shakespeare in Love. Shakespeare in Love is one of those movies that kind of the worst thing that could happen to it is it winning Best Picture. Maybe that's an overreach because I don't know if we'd still be talking about it if it hadn't won. But I think, if you can separate it from this conversation about it being the movie that beat Private Ryan and it's, being, Weinstein doing his award season finagling, like it's a fine movie. I don't know that I would peg it as like a Best Picture nominee, but in terms of like a very charming, fun, romantic movie to put on, like I think it's a really fun movie as a fan of Shakespeare. I dig the movie. I watch it every couple of years, and I always think like, this is fine. This is charming. I think it's got good performances. I think the writing is clever enough. I don't think any of it is particularly exceptional, but I think it's a good movie. So, I always feel a little bad for it that it has to live in the shadow of what it did to Saving Private Ryan when, it's a fine movie. It's a good movie. And, I watch it every couple of years. Question 8, going into that. Shakespeare in Love was famously pushed by Harvey Weinstein while he was at the height of his powers in Hollywood. Should all Weinstein-produced movies retroactively have their places in history removed, like college sports does with cheating teams and players, etc.? I mean, my short answer, no, just because movies are such a massive undertaking by a group of people, and directors and producers will take the brunt of that credit. And Harvey Weinstein, I think, gets a lot of the credit for the legacy because it's part of his finagling that the movie wins Best Picture, and that kind of does secure its legacy. But that's a movie with a lot of fine performances from actors we know and love. Like, it's written, Tom Stoppard, I forget who the other co-writer is. But like there's a lot of work that goes into it. So I'm not necessarily a fan of saying like we need to scrub all Weinstein produced movies from history, because loathe to say it, but he discovered like a lot of great talents and produced some pretty exceptional movies. And I'm not ready to kiss those off because he's a monster. Glad he's suffered consequences for what he's done. I think that's kind of where we need to look at this. I don't think we need to scrub the work that literally hundreds and thousands of people did on these films just because of him. Number 9, what impact, if any, does the John Williams score have on the emotional journey you take while watching the story unfold? What's funny is this is one of those Spielberg movies where I feel like Williams' score is pretty like unmemorable, unremarkable, which is not to say like it's not affecting. The moments I can think of it are really the bookend pieces in the cemetery at the beginning and at the end. That's where you get kind of like that hymn to the fallen theme and then the closing credits. But other than that, the only time I can really think, and I was like consciously looking for it watching the movie, but the scene where Mother Ryan is washing the dishes and sees the car driving up and falls to the ground, that beautiful shot, is kind of the only other time I can think of like Williams' score actually coming in and leaving an impact, because so much of the movie is really not the musician and the score, it's the sound team's movie. And so much of it works because I think it's largely devoid of score, thinking about the Normandy scene and things. So, it'll pump up in some of these moments, Tom Hanks making his big speech about his past and who he is and how he feels like he's losing a grip on who he is. It comes in, but this is almost one of those movies where you kind of wish that maybe if Spielberg wasn't going to use John Williams to like the normal effect and, do that like operatic thing he did so beautifully in Jurassic Park or E.T., that maybe it would have been nice for Spielberg to try his hand with a different composer. Not to say I don't appreciate what John Williams did on the score. It's just, it would come nowhere near to me saying like this is one of the truly memorable John Williams score. But that's actually something I really appreciate about the movie, because that is kind of a different thing brought to this, iconic team up. These guys have plenty of other movies where the music like works completely on its own. Your Jurassic Parks, your E.T.s, your Jaws, your Raiders of the Lost Ark. You can listen to all those albums devoid of images and they work. So that's a really interesting question. And I kind of stand by it. I think it would be great to see if somebody else in an alternate reality could have done the score for this movie to see if it would have had a different impact. So number 10, the film features a large ensemble cast of actors. What one particular character or performance stands out to you and why? This time around, I got really on board with Edward Burns as Ryben, who's a character I kind of always overlooked as just being kind of like the naysayer, the whiner. But I think the older they get, the more I think I relate to him and see him as like my true surrogate more than Upham, even as a guy who just doesn't see the logic, doesn't see the sense, is not like a naysayer, a bad guy. He's a skilled part of the team. He's a vital soldier. And I don't know. You watch a movie so many times and you always hit that rewatch where there's a character you've kind of like dusted off and never paid much attention to. And Ryben, he just like really hit me this time around, and all the more potent because he's one of the two survivors. Up to this point, I'd always kind of zeroed in on Upham. Want to give some love to Edward Burns. I think he's kind of undervalued in the movie and does a really good job. And I like the standoff scene with him and Sizemore and how he's threatening to leave, and Tom Hanks' big speech and carrying the bodies for burial kind of touches him and causes him to stay. I think it's a well done scene. So shout out to Edward Burns. Number 11, is this the closest a Vin Diesel performance ever got to being in consideration for an Academy Award nomination? Closest, probably. I don't know a lot of the like early Vin Diesel stuff, where he kind of had this reputation of maybe he was doing like more interesting acting jobs. He's kind of been, stuck in Dominic Toretto land. But yeah, the thing is like closest, yes, but I don't think anybody would ever truly consider him for a nomination because as you kind of watch the movie, you can like very clearly see it being telegraphed. Like he's being set up to be the first one to go. That the movie operates on this kind of mathematical exchange about the question of how many soldiers is it worth to save this one guy. So clearly, the dramatic structure of the movie is leading you towards like, we're going to lose more than one of these guys, and you have to account for like, was that worth it? And as you look at Caparzo, who is a fun character, but all of his dialogue is kind of like the cocky one, the I know exactly what the captain did because I pay attention to details. He, and he kind of like giving Upham a hard time. He's the big brother, but he kind of lacks the personality of a Ryben or an Upham. And so it's kind of clearly telegraphed, like he's being set up to be the first one we're going to lose, and that's his structural function in the story. So I don't think he ever would stand a chance at a nomination even in this role, but just by virtue of being in this movie that was taking award season by storm and still leaves a lasting legacy, probably the closest he's ever gotten. And finally, does Saving Private Ryan do a good job of telling the story of World War II through an authentic historical lens, or is it in any way a victim of being considered American war propaganda? What's funny is like the bookends, I think, really lean heavily into like, oh my goodness, this is going to be the most ooh-rah, propaganda-laden movie ever. And the more I watch it, just the more I'm impressed with, all the choices that Spielberg and the writers and everybody made to try to not make this like that story. Like it mentioned kind of at the top of my recording that the movie seems set up to be this movie about the brotherhood of soldiers and how they stick together. And there's certainly an element of that, but really the movie's about a bunch of guys who work together to get a job done. Like they're just a crew, they're a team. Clearly they have connections to each other, but it's not really hitting that emotional beat a ton. And we also have these moments that I think are pretty even-handed to the enemy side, because you look at this theater and you say, okay, it's Americans versus Nazis, and this movie has several scenes, the Steamboat Willie one being the clear example of, these guys are also just drafted to do a job for their country as well. And so I think that kind of takes the propagandic edge off, and you see American soldiers doing heinous things. There's the part of the Normandy scene where the bunker blows up and the Germans are, piling out on fire, and they're screaming, let them burn, don't waste the bullets. You see everybody just kind of falling prey to like the brutality and like the reality of what you have to do, that you kind of have to be brutal in a war, but there's not anything that's like particularly noble about it. It's not even particularly easy to justify. So I think the movie actually does a really good job not being a piece of propaganda, and clearly, similar to All Quiet on the Western Front, it's a movie that, upped its violence, upped the stark reality, even the handheld camera, to show that there's in no way is fun or adventurous or exciting. There is this, if I wanted to play devil's advocate, you could make this case that it is a bit fulfilling to see these guys like do their job well, planning out how they're going to take the machine gun nest, or how they get from the boats all the way up the beach to taking the beach in Normandy. That's a part of, that thing Hitchcock said about how we like to see people who are good at their jobs, but at the same time, it's not necessarily propagandic. I don't feel it's, again, just like a job that had to get done. It was you or them. So I give the movie a lot of credit for that, and I think that is, the bookends. I see the idea, see the sentimentality. I do get choked up a bit, but I feel there's a better movie in there potentially without them, because they do lean it a bit more towards the propaganda, but still, that core idea of, Ryan living with regret and wondering, did he earn it? Has he lived a good life? It's a good idea. I think the execution's a little bit off. And those are all the questions. And I, again, really happy to be invited to this, guys. I'm a big fan of this movie. Like I said, I'd say it's like maybe 6 or 7 on my favorite Spielbergs. But I think it's a pretty exceptional war movie. It's a pretty exceptional, movie of its era. Definitely a game changer cinematography wise, and even, showing action and battle scenes. I think like you see Private Ryan's influence on even things like Gladiator and movies that would come down the road in the years to come. Like, it was definitely a watermark on the war movie genre and even on action filmmaking. And I'm excited to do an episode on it someday. But CineMusts is my podcast. We are not currently releasing new episodes. I'm quite busy in a new stage of fatherhood and just getting a pesky thing called a full-time job. But we'll be back eventually. But we are going to be looking at reopening polls. We're 150 plus episodes in, almost 200 films that have been discussed on our podcast, talking about if they're essential movies, and some of those have not been revisited or looked at since these shows started dropping in the mid 2010s. So I'm going to start, on our social medias, on X, on Instagram, re-releasing polls on some of our very early episodes, just to kind of update if the movies covered truly deserve that status of must see, if we really recommend everybody see them, or if they're kind of in a middle ground. So, appreciate it if you give us a follow at CineMusts on X or Instagram, so you can cast your vote on if movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind or Mad Max or dozens of other movies that we covered back then still have the status that they did. I'm kind of personally hoping we can get some of our middle tier CineTrusts into the essential viewing with an extra round of votes, but we'll see what happens. I let democracy hold its sway. But thank you, Andrew, for the invite here. Hope that I shed some light on anything. It's a great movie, and I'm just glad to talk about it. I wish you all the best. Good luck out there.
Corn Dog, Peterson Hill here reporting for duty, sir. Here for the Saving Private Ryan collaboration. Very excited to be a voice on this. You can catch me on the War Starts at Midnight podcast. We've got a great back catalog where we take deep dives into directors and their filmographies. Most recently, we did Paul Thomas Anderson and Wes Anderson. As well, you can catch me on several G-Mood episodes and the 1975 Revisionist Almanac. Other than that, you can check me out on all my social handles at Peterson W. Hill, Letterboxd, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, all those. But let's just dive right in. So this is our collaboration for Saving Private Ryan, Steven Spielberg's 1998 film. First question. What are your memories of seeing the movie for the first time? So I saw this opening day with my father, my grandfather, and I would imagine my siblings were there as well. We were actually on a family beach trip to just outside of Charleston, South Carolina, and from early reports and what I would say Entertainment Tonight was covering from the film, and kind of the critical response to this film, it was almost like a patriotic duty to see this film in theaters. And my grandfather was actually in D-Day. He was a little bit farther away from this beach. He was about a mile down from where they landed here, so he had a much easier time on the beach. But this was a movie that I think affected him deeply. I remember watching the film and leaving. I was 11 at the time, and I leave the theater, go to the restroom with my dad, and I remember just being kind of in line and asking him, did you like it? And that was just kind of a question I'd always ask my dad, who took me to movies, and he kind of just shook his head and was like, of course I liked it. Very good. And I could tell in some way it was almost like he didn't want to talk about how maybe emotionally devastating and how, seeing it with his father, who was in a situation like this on the day, how that might have affected him. And as an 11-year-old, I didn't connect the dots there. But looking back now, I very much can see that. My grandfather's not one that really shared many battle stories with us. He shared plenty of his time in the Army. He was career in the military. He was a colonel in the Army, and then he also was in Korea and worked for the Pentagon. And he didn't tell much about combat, but he told us a lot of stories about being in the military. But yeah, seeing this opening day was kind of blown away by kind of the sheer adrenaline of the film as an 11-year-old, and then finding it very hard to watch, but also kind of brought into the excitement of it, because Spielberg is such a remarkable filmmaker that he can't not make this entertaining. As hard as this is to watch, it's still a very entertaining film. And so yeah, that's my first time opinions of it. Now 27 years ago, 'cause it came out in July, and I've seen it, a million times since. I've seen it so many times, especially those years after. From like 1998 to 2005, I watched this film quite a bit. Number 2, how do you think Saving Private Ryan compares to the other notable World War II film from 1998, Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line? So, I adore The Thin Red Line. I think it is pretty much a masterpiece. I think Malick's a filmmaker that really responds to me, and I quite appreciate. They're just two totally different ways to tackle this very hard subject. And while I think Spielberg does focus on the individual people, I think Malick just gets inside the heads of these people a little bit more. And I know some people find Malick cold and distant. I find Malick to be incredibly activating, and I think The Thin Red Line is one of his greatest films. But I think that when it's talking about what this film means to war and the depiction of war, I think Saving Private Ryan was taking a format and expanding upon it. And I think that Spielberg makes, I would say, probably the definitive World War II film, if not the definitive war film. And I just don't think Malick he's not aiming for that kind of ambition. He's aiming for something much more personal. So I think, while I love both, I think Saving Private Ryan probably is certainly the more important film. But I think that Malick's Thin Red Line is about as good as the film can be as well. Just a different style of dealing with this very difficult subject matter. Let's So number three. What is your Mount Rushmore for films dealing with war? Any war. Okay, so I do think putting Saving Private Ryan on this list is... I find it foolhardy not to, even if you can argue against it. I think Saving Private Ryan is just culturally, it is too important to leave off of this list. But then from a quality perspective, I think also should be on this list. So Saving Private Ryan certainly has a spot on this list for me. And then I think this part of the question gets now really difficult because, war films, you can go back to things like Troy. Troy's a war film. It wouldn't make my list, but you can do something that goes all the way back to that war. To the Trojan Wars. But I think I'm going to keep it like modern warfare or like 1650 onwards, where guns are a factor and guns are a big perspective. So for me, Akira Kurosawa's Ron is certainly on the list. I think it is the best film I'm going to mention of the list here, but is a different kind of war film. It's not a war film we've been a part of, but I think Kurosawa's use of his camera is incredibly kind of vivacious and interesting, and kind of matches in a lot of ways that Spielberg moves his camera in this film. Next, I do think it's really hard to look at something like The Thin Red Line and not put it on this list. For me, it is a much more personal film than Saving Private Ryan. Not that there's not a personal thrust to Saving Private Ryan, but I think we see what war does to these young men in a way that I don't think Saving Private Ryan is quite as interested in. So I think The Thin Red Line will make the list. And then my last, I guess I'm going to have to go Master and Commander, a movie I just absolutely adore. Sadly, couldn't find space for it on my top 50 for the Cinema Legacy poll. If we do this thing in like 4 or 5 years again, I don't know, maybe it does then, because that is a film that I love and I've seen a million times. But there's so many great war films. Just a couple of honorable mentions. Schindler's List is theoretically a war film. English Patient is a really interesting version of a war film. I love, I think, or at least I did when I was in high school, Platoon was a really powerful and activating experience to me as a teenager seeing it as well. I do think something like The Hurt Locker is very effective at what it's doing. I think Dunkirk and Oppenheimer are both incredibly effective from Christopher Nolan. War Horse from Spielberg is quite interesting. I don't think it's quite as good as some of these, but quite like that film, 1917. But the list can be very long. Really a subject that we can go back to quite a bit. Only one more I'll mention is The Last of the Mohicans, a movie I absolutely adore. I think that is a great old-fashioned war and adventure film. So that could, let me pull off Thin Red Line and put Last Mohicans, just because I want something to be a little bit more fun. That's what I'm going to do. My four. It'll be Ron, Last Mohicans, Saving Private Ryan, and finish off my number 4 slot, Master and Commander. Number 4, I apologize. Number 4 is the opening scene where the American troops storm the beach at Normandy, the most intense, anxiety-inducing piece of filmmaking in any war movie. It's certainly up there. I think it is, if it is not the most, it is on a very short list. I certainly think the turret gun that they attack is very anxiety-inducing in this film as well. Some other things. I think Platoon has a couple really very difficult things to watch. Especially when it's dealing with the Vietnamese villagers. I think that's a very hard scene to watch as well. I do think that something, like in American Sniper, there's a couple scenes where those are difficult to watch too. But I think easily this is the most anxiety-inducing sequence for that amount of time. This is a very extended piece of filmmaking. Hurt Locker's got some great sequences, but I think, the Saving Private Ryan sequence is the greatest piece of war filmmaking of all time, and I guess in turn has to be the most anxiety-inducing. So number 5, did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director that year? If your answer is no, who would you have given the award to? It can be someone nominated or not. I think this is a really easy question of yes, he should have won. No questions asked. I think that this is one of the most impeccably directed films ever made. Kind of as far as like perfect filmmaking goes, I think something like No Country for Old Men is a perfectly calibrated film. Saving Private Ryan is a perfectly calibrated film. I think these are perfect encapsulations of what the director's responsibilities are as a filmmaker, and kind of running this army of people, save a better word. But I think easily this should have won Best Director. So, number 6, on the 1998 Almanac episode in season 1, Saving Private Ryan beat Shakespeare in Love, the actual Best Picture winner, in the online vote to claim the revised win. Were we and the voters correct in determining this and the best film of 1998? If not, what movie do you think should be considered the best that year and why? So I do think that Saving Private Ryan is the best film of 1998. I think Shakespeare in Love is a pretty lovely film. It's a really wonderful experience, wonderful performances. It's got Tom Stoppard's just incredible film. I love John Madden's direction. Luminous, Gwyneth Paltrow. This is a movie I really love, but Saving Private Ryan is 1, the more important film, 2, the greater achievement, and then 3, I think, is just when you look back at films that win Best Picture, Shakespeare in Love, I don't feel is a blemish by any means. There's certain films that you look and you're like, oh man, how did that win Best Picture? That is not the case with Shakespeare in Love. But I think when you look at the fact that it beat Saving Private Ryan, it is a pretty egregious loss that Saving Private Ryan has. It should have won. And, it's the deal that it was. So sadly, it is true. I think it should have won, but yeah. All right. So now on to question 7. In general, what do you think of Shakespeare in Love as a movie separated from Best Picture win entirely? Okay. So I'm answering these off the cuff. As I said, I think it's a pretty wonderful film. And honestly, there are many years that I think Shakespeare in Love, probably should have won. This is just not one of those years. It's facing an immovable object in my mind with Saving Private Ryan. I'd probably put it as number 3 film to win Best Picture that year, behind Saving Private Ryan and Thin Red Line. Next, let's go number 8. Shakespeare in Love was famously pushed by Harvey Weinstein while he was at the height of his power in Hollywood. Should all Weinstein-produced movies retroactively have their places in history removed, like college sports do with cheating teams or players? I think definitively no. College teams, there's kind of a way you can markedly analyze those and say this is how the cheating occurred, whether it's paying players when that was illegal, or any number of things. So I think there's a way to actually say this is how they cheated and these are the steps they took. I don't think you can really do that with film. And at the end of the day, as far as sports go, there's a definitive victor. So if you're a football team and you win, you win. The score says 30-20 at the end. You just won, right? The difference in film is that it is an art form, and I don't think you can grade or think about art the same way that you can think about sports, even as a competition. And I think that the difference for something like the Oscars to whoever wins the national championship in college football for that year is such a different thing. So if you're the national championship winner for football, it brings light to your program, and it ends. You win the national championship, and the season's over, right? It doesn't matter if somebody watches your game in a year from now. It's not going to change in the history books. Whereas something like Shakespeare in Love, the fact that it did win Best Picture means that people forever are going to look back and say, like the Best Picture cast, like Kieran B does over at that show, I now need to watch all the Best Pictures. Let me now watch Shakespeare in Love. So, in some way, I think something like Shakespeare in Love beating Saving Private Ryan doesn't really bother me all that much, because at the end of the day, Saving Private Ryan is still thought of as the more important and better achievement by, I would say, 80% of people, maybe not quite that many, but quite a bit. And you take that, people are going to watch Steven Spielberg movies regardless. So, something like Shakespeare in Love gets a little bit more of a boost because it wins Best Picture. I think the worst thing that happened to that movie from a critical or evaluation standpoint is people saying, oh yeah, Shakespeare in Love, that shouldn't have won Best Picture. But I don't know, Saving Private Ryan, maybe people get upset and the backlash starts happening on that. And they're like, gosh, Spielberg, just whenever he goes serious, now he's going to win an Oscar. The backlash is always going to be there. And to me, this is not a competition like football, like tennis, basketball, whatever sport you want to say. The winners and losers are very different. Yes, Harvey Weinstein might have been the person who's pulling the strings, but end of the day, film is a collaborative, and it's a medium that is built from teams, not from individuals. Harvey Weinstein might have left his blemish on these, but didn't leave the mark on Gwyneth Paltrow, doesn't leave the mark on John Madden, Ben Affleck, Tom Wilkinson, Judi Dench, anyone in the film, or any of the crafts people who did work on Shakespeare in Love. Tom Stoppard's script is no better or worse because of Harvey Weinstein. That script stands on its own. Weinstein is just, he's a producer. He's the person pulling the strings. So that's a long-winded way of saying, no, I just think we need to embrace whatever does win. And then sometimes you have a weird one like Green Book or Crash or Shape of Water that I don't think are particularly good films. But, sometimes you just got to remember that these are voted on by people, and sometimes those people have different tastes, If something like Crash wins, it's the more palatable film because, I don't know, 90-year-olds on the Academy didn't want to watch Brokeback Mountain. I think that's stupid, and I think it's silly. But this is not a perfect science. It's a very different approach than like sports. So yeah. Number 9. What impact, if any, does the John Williams score have on the emotional journey you take while watching the story unfold? Oh, man. So I think, this is not one of my top tier Williams scores. I say that, but the guy's made, I don't know how many great scores. He's got more great scores than most people have great anythings. He's got more great scores than most people even have scores. So, than a composer at least. So, I think it's a very effective score, and it does, I think, elevate scenes, and it does not detract or become maudlin. And I think one of the things that Spielberg is often accused of is being a little bit too saccharine and a little bit too sentimental. And I think part of that does come from the Williams scores, because they can be more bombastic, and that is just an old school composer. And it will, his score for E.T., which is probably the best thing he ever did, that's a huge, bombastic, thrilling score. And this just isn't that. This is more subtle. It's not trying to make you feel a certain way at any given point. Number 10. The film features a large ensemble cast of characters. What one particular character performance stands out to you, and why? So I'm really quickly going to run through a couple that didn't make it, but I think Tom Sizemore as the Corporal is very good. I think Edward Burns brings a pretty good energy to the movie, playing Brooklyn. I mean, that's not his name. His name's Rybin, but he is playing Brooklyn, the city. I think Mellish is played very well by Adam Goldberg. Jonathan Rhys Davies, he's got great performance as, oh my gosh, drawing a blank on his name right now, but the interpreter. I personally, though, I think that Giovanni Ribisi is probably the best he's ever been on screen. It's probably his most subtle acting as well, which is partly where I think he really stands out. And he's got that incredible monologue where he's talking about his mother, and then he has the realization that, like, sometimes I would basically pretend to be asleep even though she came in. And it's the kind of thing, knowing what happens to him in the film. It is so tragic watching him have this realization where it's like, I'm never going to be able to be in that situation again. And it's all told in his face. None of it's said verbally. He's just like, I don't know why I did that. And he has this realization that, like, I'm not ever going to be able to experience that again. And then finally his tragic demise, truly, I think, the most upsetting death in the film, as you're watching the life just leave his body. And he is playing it, I think, so beautifully. And I think really, he's not overplaying it. He's not rubbing your face in it. He is being subtle, and it's an incredible piece of acting. So I love Giovanni Ribisi in this film. I think he is the one. He is the guy that Hanks gets his nomination. And I think, I think I may have misread the question too. I do think Tom Hanks is the best performance in this film. I think he is absolutely phenomenal. I'm looking at this as like secondary character and thinking about the large ensemble, because I think Tom Hanks rests so much of this film on him. And this is, just shows that Hanks is one of the greatest people to ever be a movie star. He has these tiny moments in this film, and he has this slight movement of his face, and it tells an entire paragraph or monologue that would have been written. So I think Spielberg just knows how to use Hanks so well in this film. So number 11, is this the closest a Vin Diesel performance ever got to being in consideration for an Academy Award nomination? Sure. I guess so. I don't know how close he ever was, but I guess by default, yes. I don't think that The Last Wish Hunter is one that he would have got nominated for. So number 12, does Saving Private Ryan do a good job of telling the story of World War II through an authentic historical lens, or is it in any way a victim of being considered American war propaganda? So that's a really complicated question, and I think that my initial reaction to this question, if I would have did the person that watched it 25 years ago, is that I absolutely would have said it's war propaganda, but it's the good guys. We took on the Nazis. Like, it's not that big a deal. Like, hey, we're the good guys. But now seeing this in 2025, I think he shows the fracturing of that unit and that they are all hanging on by a thin thread. And I think that's very important to what the film is trying to say about this specific unit. We for years just always thought, oh, World War II, the Great War. These men did a great thing. And they came back and, America was prosperous after this, and it's been great ever since. And that's just not the case. These men did something heroic in the sense that they took on the Germans, but they also had to deal with what the war made them do. And that is something I find very compelling in this film, is that you're watching these men, and I think the turret scene just gets at what is very important about this story. It's this story about these 8 men going to save one life. And are the 8 men that are going out to save Ryan, are their lives less important? And of course, the human thing is to say no. But I think Ted Danson's character has that great moment where he's like, hey, I got some brothers, go get them. And you just get this sense that all of these men are just at the end of their rope. They, mentally, physically, emotionally, and Ted Danson has this small exchange, and he says, go get them. That is something good you can do right now. That is one good thing that can come out of this war. And, there's no talk of concentration camps in this film. There's no talk of, really, there's some casual mentions of Hitler and what the Germans are doing, but not really. So I think taking the politics out of this is part of the important aspect of it. And Spielberg really looking at this group of men as a unit. And when one person in the unit is unhappy, it can sour the entire dynamic. And this is something, if you're a soldier, is a questionable mission. Because you're thinking, well, I want to go home and see my family. Yes, he has lost brothers. And you can mentally say in your mind, yes, I can't, that's not fair, but I understand. You can kind of intellectualize why it's important that he goes home. But if you're the soldier in the situation, you want to get home. You want to stop wearing, wet socks and eating food that's, cold or rancid, or, there's the scene where they share the piece of gum and it's like, who cares? All these little details. So I think, it makes war look awful and horrendous, but, I think inevitably there has to always be some bit of heroism in a World War II film, because, we took on the greatest, America and the Allies took on the greatest threat in the history of the country, in the history of the world, potentially, and the axis of evil and the Hitler and his goons. I think that the thinner line, the Battle of Guadalcanal, is really interesting, and that's such an interesting battle in so many ways. And the thinner line, I think, depicts it very well. But there's a reason why we always focus on the European theater when it comes to World War II. Usually, we don't focus on the Pacific theater as much, because we really think about Europe and fighting Hitler, fighting that evil. I hate to say this, we're just about 80 years removed from this movie, 81, because it takes place in 1944. And we always say, hey, we can't let it happen again, but we're letting it happen again, both in Africa and in Gaza right now. So it's tough, I think it's very important for us to remember that America is not always the good guys, and we are in a moment where we could choose to be the good guys right now, and I hope we do, but it doesn't feel like we're in that space. So no, I don't think the movie takes kind of a rosy lens. I think it shows honestly probably what it was like. Doesn't glamorize these men by any means. I think it's important why it's Tom Hanks. If it's a movie 40 years before, it's not Hanks, right? It's Sinatra or like Kirk Douglas, who are these matinee idols, and that's just not Tom Hanks. He's more of your everyman, and so watching your everyman, kill people, watching him struggle with the morality of this mission, watching him have tremors in his hand, I think is very difficult. And if you cast somebody different in the lead role, it's just not quite the same movie. So that's my questions, Corns. Again, my name is Peterson Hill of War Starts at Midnight. Check out my back catalog there, as well as appearances on Revisionist Almanac and Gmote. You can get all my handles at Peterson W. Hill, whether it's Twitter, Letterboxd, Instagram, Blue Sky. So, yep. Thanks, Corn, for inviting me to do this. Had a great time revisiting this very, very good film and give you my thoughts.
Hello, my name is Aaron, and my online username is 2Crow. So, for anybody that I've interacted with, hello. I don't have a podcast or anything, but since a young age, movies have always been a big part of my life. And as I grew up and got older and learned to appreciate movies, they just became a passion for me. When Andrew sent out this request to see if anybody wanted to talk Saving Private Ryan, I jumped at the opportunity because I, first off, just love talking movies, love hearing people talk about movies, and Saving Private Ryan has always been a movie that meant a lot to me. So I am just going to jump on in. So, question 1, what are your memories of seeing the movie for the first time? Well, I would have been about 10 when the movie came out, and all I really remember is my parents coming home from the theater and talking about how great it was. I really wasn't allowed to watch it at the time for obvious reasons, but later on I did. I know when I was visiting my mother's parents, I got to listen to my grandfather, who was in World War II. He talked about how the opening moments of Normandy made him cry in the theater. He wasn't at Omaha Beach, but he did know people who were, and he said those moments, that opening scene, was just very real for him, almost too real. My grandfather didn't like talking about his time in the war, and in those rare times that he would, it just kind of felt like a special occasion where we were able to, I guess, see and hear a part of his life, him opening up. So I don't think it was until the movie was released on VHS that I finally got to watch it. And even at that time, I probably would have been about 11 or 12. I was completely engrossed during those first moments. Mainly because seeing this old man, a war veteran, wandering the gravestones and finally falling to his knees in tears, I just instantly thought of my grandfather. And when it did transition to Omaha Beach, I was just speechless at the brutal nature of what was being shown. What has always stuck with me is how effective I feel the movie pulls off a twist ending so subtle and powerful that when I talk about it having one of the best twists, others tend to look at me kind of confused. And that is, the opening moments show an older man, and then zooming in on his eyes, we transition to Tom Hanks's Captain Miller. Never for a moment throughout the entire movie did I ever doubt that they were the same two people. So for me, I always knew for certain Hanks was the only person guaranteed to survive the next 3 hours. So when Miller does die, the death was that much more shocking to me. And the revelation that it was Matt Damon's Private Ryan that bookends the movie reiterates that in war, no one's really safe. Question 2. How do you think Saving Private Ryan compares to The Thin Red Line? I don't know if this will be a hot take or not, but I am not really a big fan of The Thin Red Line. I don't think it's really that great. I'm not a fan of Terrence Malick, mainly because I tend to find his writing boring. His ability as a director is phenomenal, and his cinematographers capture beautiful images, but it's the writing and the story that has never really impressed me. Because of this, I don't remember enough about The Thin Red Line to properly compare the two movies. From what I do remember, I liked Elias Koteas, and hopefully I pronounced that right. If not, I'm sure everybody's yelling at me. I said it wrong. And I would have liked to have seen him get some awards attention. But otherwise, I like that Saving Private Ryan had a much more consistent cast that we got to spend time with and getting to know. And when people start dying, I feel like there was a bigger impact. And if I have any of that information about The Thin Red Line wrong, I apologize. It's probably been about 15, 20 years since I watched it. Question 3. What is your Mount Rushmore of films dealing with war? It's a difficult question because there are a number of ways to look at war. Real, fictional, gang, political, and so forth. So I'm going to talk about 4 movies that cover war in a variety of ways. So if I'm going with traditional sense of a real war, I'm always going to state the Saving Private Ryan as my favorite. Maybe it's a cliche answer, but for me, it's the gold standard of war movies. My next choice is one I watched recently for the first time, The Best Years of Our Lives. While so many war movies focus on depicting the war itself, I'm just as interested in seeing movies that show what happens after the war ends. Too many times do we see movies showing that once war ends, it all ends. Everybody moves on. So I very much appreciate when I see a movie that shows that the effects of a war extend beyond the fighting itself. I'm going to go to a fictional war, and I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to name 3 movies as one, because I'm going to talk about the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I love how Tolkien crafted a complete war from start to finish, and the way Jackson and his co-writers took the material and, in my opinion, improved upon it by just kind of trimming the slower parts of the novels. I just love that we get a fantasy epic, and I say epic in the literal sense of the word. Finally, I'm going to name one of my favorite movies that deals with war in an intergalactic sense. No, not Star Wars. I'm going to talk Independence Day. I often get laughed at for stating this is my go-to movie every 4th of July, but there's so much fun to be had with this sci-fi story. Here we look at a battle and a war, not between countries, but one that forces all the countries to put aside their differences and fight for the future of mankind. And I have to say it, we have Bill Pullman giving one of the greatest movie speeches ever. So, to recap, I'm saying Saving Private Ryan, Best Years of Our Lives, Lord of the Rings, and Independence Day. Question 4. Is the opening scene the most intense, anxiety-inducing piece of filmmaking in any war movie? In a word, yes. Dropping the audience into a sequence where we're surrounded by death is a powerful way to let the audience know what kind of movie we're in for. Something that's always stuck with me is when there's a moment where a bullet bounces off of a soldier's helmet, and then he takes it off in disbelief, and the next bullet kills him. It's a moment that shows the audience just how intense it is being in a battle, where there is no reprieve, there's just luck. Probably the closest I can think of from another movie would be the Russian roulette scene from The Deer Hunter. There we have less stress. There we have a lot of stress, even though deep down in that moment in The Deer Hunter, the first time, we know both are going to survive. But it's still a really tense moment. Question 5. Did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director? Yes. Even if it's just for the opening scene alone. I would like to say that I have more thoughts on that, but I think I've already said a lot about the movie as is. And yes, Spielberg did an amazing job. Question 6. On the 1998 Almanac episode in Season 1, Saving Private Ryan beat Shakespeare in Love in the online vote to claim the revised win. Were they and the voters correct? Yes. Shakespeare in Love is a perfectly fine romantic comedy, but Saving Private Ryan is, in my opinion, the best war movie. Question 7. In general, what do you think of Shakespeare in Love as a movie? I think the movie is a good and entertaining romantic comedy. I refused to watch it for several years, mainly out of spite. But when I finally sat down to give it a fair chance, I was pleasantly surprised. A number of great actors are assembled, and I do love ensemble movies. And they all deliver really good performances. And while I don't agree with either of its acting wins, I do agree with the nominations. Story isn't anything amazing, but it is still a fun kind of what-if situation. Question 8. Shakespeare in Love was pushed by Weinstein. Should his movies retroactively have their places in history removed? Like college sports does with cheating teams and players. I do not think so. For me, I don't consider Weinstein's excessive campaigning as cheating. I see it as him being one of the first people to treat the Oscars like a business. He wanted his movie to win awards in order to boost its prestige and earn more money. So he did what he needed to, and unfortunately it worked. If anything, this strategy reflects more on the Academy and its members falling for his antics. I've always argued that this was the year when the Oscars became less about the movies themselves and more about the people who are pulling the strings behind certain movies. The other angle I always look at during these conversations is that Weinstein is just one person among all the hundreds of people who put in time and effort to make movies, especially this one. And I've never found it fair to punish everyone else for one person's actions. And that's kind of what would be happening if the movie was stripped. The next argument is that Shakespeare in Love could keep its Best Picture win, but Weinstein's statue's taken away. But that doesn't really matter because the statue is merely symbolic of the win, and as long as the movie's going to keep its win, Weinstein's name is almost always going to be attached to it. And the last suggestion is completely taking away the Best Picture win, but that won't make a bit of difference because it'll always be remembered as the quote-unquote real Best Picture winner. And let's say they did take it away and gave it to Saving Private Ryan. Private Ryan would just be seen kind of retroactively as a movie that won on a technicality. The other issue with stripping away the award is that would mean the Academy has to set standards for what actions result in such a punishment and which actions don't. How far can a person go before they get punished or not punished? If Weinstein's award is taken away, should Kevin Spacey's? Or does Spacey get to keep his because he has not been convicted? Will Smith, on the other hand, never had any charges filed, yet we got to see his actions live on TV. Does he get to keep his award? I feel like if they tried to do this, decisions would get foggy, details would get skewed as they try to figure out who gets to keep their award and who doesn't. The way I look at it, he was expelled from the Academy, and I think that says enough. What impact does John Williams' score have on the emotional journey? I think the score is very beautiful, but I don't believe it's as effective as it could be. I feel like it's more soothing and somber, and I tend to like scores that keep the audience on edge, as if to remind us that even when there's no fighting going on, there's still fighting occurring somewhere off screen. Prime example that I enjoy was the score for All Quiet on the Western Front from 2022. Or 1917 that came out in 2019. In both those cases, the music helps drive the movie when there's slight lulls in the action. And all throughout the awards season in 2022, anytime All Quiet on the Western Front would win something, the main booming theme would play, and it became so ingrained in my mind. And I think that is a very, very effective score. Question 10. What one character or performance stands out and why? I have always liked Barry Pepper as Daniel Jackson for several reasons. First and foremost, I've just always liked Barry Pepper. He's somebody that I feel like when I was younger, right around the time this movie came out, I was seeing him in a variety of different movies, and I've just always really, really enjoyed him. And I've always been a little disappointed that his career never really fully took off. I'm happy he's been successful, but I always wanted more for him. Looking at his character, I've always thought there's something meaningful about him playing a man who proclaims that he's so good at killing that all he needs to be is within 1 mile of Hitler and the war's over. Yet, any time he's seen firing his rifle, he's basically saying the rosary. He's praying. And there is something very effective about a religious person in a position where they're forced to put their faith aside in order to fight, but they're trying to also stay religious. Question 11. Is this the closest Vin Diesel has gotten to an Academy Award nomination? Well, I don't believe Vin Diesel has ever been close to a nomination, but looking at his career, yes, I suppose this is the closest. I don't know how many people would have him in the conversation for a supporting nomination, but I can't think of any other movie, looking at his filmography, that he would have been any closer. Let's see. Question 12. Does Saving Private Ryan do a good job of telling the story of World War II through an authentic history lens? Or is it in any way a victim of being considered American war propaganda? I don't see this movie as propaganda. I see it as telling a story about a small military troop that almost feel like a family trying to find a single person. This was inspired by a sort of what-if scenario, inspired by families who had multiple people fighting in the war, specifically the Sullivan brothers and the Nealon brothers. If there is any kind of propaganda, I see it as anti-war propaganda, showing the audience just how bad a person can be changed by combat. Tom Hanks is seen as a calm and effective leader, fighting without thinking about how many people he's killed. His troops all have a bet on what he must be like back home, and they're all shocked, as was I, that he's just an high school English teacher. The war has changed him so much, and for the worse. In his speech, he flat out says the same thing. He's trying to hold on to his humanity. Another scene is the men going through the bag of dog tags belonging to all the soldiers that have died, and rather than show respect to the dead, they make a game out of it. It's only when Giovanni Ribisi's character rushes forward in anger that the other soldiers are brought back to reality and reminded that each of these little plates of metal represent a dead human being. Let's see. And when I think of American war propaganda, I think of something like American Sniper, a movie I admittedly enjoy, but the central character takes pride in how many quote-unquote terrorists he's killed. His only regret isn't about the people he's killed, but how he couldn't save his fellow soldiers. The movie eases back on this. Honestly, I think the book is a lot more of pure propaganda. And the other one I'm thinking of is The Green Berets, which is just John Wayne showing American audiences that Vietnam is a much better place because the U.S. went in and quote-unquote fixed it. To me, that was pure bullshit propaganda. That's what I think of that one. And that is it for me. So I want to thank Andrew for letting me to contribute. And I hope you all have enjoyed my thoughts. And take care. Bye.
Hey, Andrew. I will do my best to read through this. I might have to pause to answer some questions, but yeah, here we go. Question number 1. What are my memories of seeing Saving Private Ryan for the first time? I saw Saving Private Ryan in theaters. I was 14 years old, and because my mom worked in the industry, we already knew that there was going to be some sort of graphic depiction of war, maybe in a way that we hadn't really seen before, and that was kind of the buzz in the air at the time. And as graphic as it was, I think as a 14-year-old, I didn't quite grasp the value of how that was portrayed. And it wasn't until much later when I saw it again at home and I had grown up a little bit that moment hit me differently. But that said, I really did enjoy the movie a lot as a theatrical experience, and I've spoken about Spielberg's quality as a craftsman of film many times, so that's really not entirely surprising. Question number 2, how do I think Saving Private Ryan compares to the other notable World War II film from 1998, Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line? I'll keep this one short and sweet because I saw The Thin Red Line once, not even in theaters, several years later once it was on cable, and I was still fairly young, so I feel like it's less accessible than Saving Private Ryan, and it's a headier war movie in a lot of ways. And honestly, just when I was at that age, I was bored by it. I would probably appreciate it a lot more now, but at the time, for the sake of comparison, Saving Private Ryan was this superior war film. Question number 3, what is my Mount Rushmore of films dealing with war? Well, you're putting me on the spot here because I am not a ratings guy, I'm not a rankings guy, and I'm also not a Rushmore guy, but I will do my best. So rather than spending hours deliberating on which 4 I wanted to include in this, I decided to go with the 4 war movies that I've seen the most. Not necessarily the war movies that I think are the best, but the ones that I've revisited. So one of them would be this movie, Saving Private Ryan. I'm going to say also Full Metal Jacket, Jarhead, and Three Kings. You can send your angry emails to nick@thesheist.com. Question 4. Is the opening scene where the American troops storm the beach at Normandy the most intense, anxiety-inducing piece of filmmaking in any war movie? I'm going to separate this out into 2 thoughts because on the one hand, I do think it is probably the most
intense war scene up until at least recently. I feel like films like 1917 and All Quiet on the Western Front did a better job of framing the war as a vehicle for anxiety and for tension, whereas Saving Private Ryan frames that scene on the beach as an action scene. So it sort of just like changes the formula there. And so I don't necessarily think that the most intense and the most anxiety inducing are the same thing. Question 5. Did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director that year? Well, the short answer would be yes. The long answer would be more about how I view that award in particular. And I feel like a lot of it has to do with sort of efficiency. And in a film like that, to shoot it the way that he shot it, to tell that kind of story with the scope and the scale, I think he was deserving. Question number 6. On the 1998 Almanac episode in Season 1, Saving Private Ryan beat Shakespeare in Love, the actual Best Picture winner, in the online vote to claim the revised win. Were we and the voters correct in determining this as the best film of 1998? If not, what movie do you think should be considered the best that year and why? So assuming that I understand correctly that the alternate winner would come from the pool of Best Picture nominees, I would say that yes, Saving Private Ryan probably correctly was chosen as the revised Best Picture winner. If my vote had to go to another movie in the nominees pool, it would have gone to Life is Beautiful. However, if I'm misunderstanding the question a little bit and I'm allowed to reach outside the pool of Best Picture noms, I could make a case for both American History X and Truman Show as worthwhile options in the category. Question number 7. In general, what do I think of Shakespeare in Love as a movie, separating it from its Best Picture win entirely? Shakespeare in Love was the first movie, or at least the first awareness I had of movie culture really sort of condemning a Best Picture winner. So it's hard for me to remove it from that win, but when I finally did see it, I thought it was a good movie, and I kind of understood how and why it won Best Picture. That being said, I have not gone back and watched it since the one time I watched it in probably 1999. Question number 8. Shakespeare in Love was famously pushed by Harvey Weinstein while he was at the height of his power in Hollywood. Should all Weinstein-produced movies retroactively have their places in history removed, like college sports does, with cheating teams, players, etc.? This is an interesting moralistic question. I'm going to say no. I don't believe that those movies should retroactively have their places in history removed, and I found it interesting that you used college sports as a reference, because if we take a look back to, let's say, one of the most famous examples of this that involved the Reggie Bush scandal, where he had the Heisman Trophy not stripped, but he was forced to forfeit the trophy. The university was hit with major penalties like scholarship losses. They had wins vacated, postseason bans, etc. But in 2024, the Heisman Trust reinstated the trophy to Bush due to changes in college athletics, and Reggie Bush has since sued USC, the Pac-12, and the NCAA for compensation. So the Academy is not the NCAA, and that's probably a good thing. However, if you did want to follow that process logically, if you turn over that stone, it's not just Harvey Weinstein under there. I think a longer, more in-depth discussion that includes that as well as some other things in terms of Academy reform is a worthwhile discussion, but also a much longer one. Question number 9. What impact, if any, does John Williams' score have on the emotional journey you take watching the story unfold? Well, as is true with pretty much all movies featuring a John Williams score, it is the engine that drives the emotion. And you just think of all the iconic scores that he has under his belt with Jaws and Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park, Superman. Emotional pacing has always sort of been a key component to his music. And while the score for Saving Private Ryan isn't the kind of iconic score that you would notice maybe on those first few notes like some of the others I mentioned, it is not absent and it's not overlooked, and it isn't something that is handled haphazardly with this film. Question number 10. The film features a large ensemble cast of actors. What one particular character or performance stands out to you and why? That is a good question. I think in watching the movie when I sort of had first seen it and when I was a little bit younger, I always was drawn to Barry Pepper as the sort of like devoutly religious sniper because I felt the sort of juxtaposition of his religion and his prayer as he's sniping people from a tower was interesting. And I just like Barry Pepper as an actor. I also sort of was always drawn to Ed Burns because I had seen Ed Burns in a lot of other things, and I kind of liked that he was sort of like the rebellious one with the attitude. But the role and the performance that I always come back to over and over again is Jeremy Davies as Upham, because I think we're supposed to come back to that because this is a guy who's not really a soldier, and he's not really capable of being there. And so we see this journey for him, and we see a lot of the sort of complications of war through the lens of this character. And it was a really sort of genius stroke from Spielberg to make Tom Hanks basically the lead. You title the story about another character that they're going to find. You surround Hanks with a bunch of familiar faces, but really I feel like Upham is the main character. Question number 11. Is this the closest a Vin Diesel performance ever got to being in consideration for an Academy Award nomination? That's tough to say because I don't know how close he actually ever did get to being in consideration for an Academy Award nomination for this. And it's not necessarily Vin Diesel's best work either, but I guess, you know, in a Spielberg war epic, it probably is the closest that he was ever going to be. And question number 12, does Saving Private Ryan do a good job of telling the story of World War II through an authentic historical lens, or is it in any way a victim of being considered American war propaganda? I am not enough of a historian to say whether or not it does a good job of telling that World War II story authentically, but I would just have to trust that Spielberg and the people involved wanted it to be as authentic as possible, and that is why that Normandy beach scene is so impactful, is because I think it wanted to be as authentic as it actually could. Now, whether or not the entire rest of the film actually frames the World War II story in an authentic and sort of meaningful way, that's a different question. I see why it might be misinterpreted as American war propaganda because a lot of the focus is on the combat side. So while Saving Private Ryan is maybe more observational and less critical of the war that it's covering versus some other war films, I don't think I've ever seen a war film that is actually pro-war. And so I don't believe that Saving Private Ryan is American war propaganda.
All right. Thanks to the first set of contributors for this Saving Private Ryan collaboration, all 9 of them, Melissa, Matt, Kyle, Morgan, Darin, Myke, Peterson, Aaron, Nick, I appreciate all of you taking the time to do that. It was wonderful hearing all of your feedback. I will go ahead and I will give you some of the answers to my questions as well really quickly before we sign off. So what are my memories of seeing this movie for the first time? Well, I definitely have a memory of hearing a lot of noise about this movie and just how violent that opening storming the beach of Normandy scene was when it hit the theaters. Now, I was a little bit too young at the time. I was only 13, and so I obviously could not see this in the theater. But I do remember sitting down and watching it with my dad and my younger brother once it did leave the theaters, and it ended up at a Blockbuster where we rented it for a weekend and checked it out. And I was so struck by the intensity of the film. It was also the first Steven Spielberg movie I saw that was not of his more fun fare, because at that point in my life, I had seen Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, the things like that. This was the first time I experienced Steven Spielberg in a much more mature light. In terms of how do I think this movie compares to the other notable World War II film from 98, that being Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line, in my younger years, this was a no-brainer, a slam dunk. Saving Private Ryan has so much more action and adrenaline in its veins. However, as I've gotten older and wiser and more contemplative about life, I find that Malick's Thin Red Line speaks to me even more in the way it reflects on life, more than caring so much about the inner workings of a specific battle or a set of troops on a mission. And I suspect that shift from preferring Saving Private Ryan to The Thin Red Line will only continue to happen in the next evolution of my life, but I guess really only time and some rewatches will determine if that's the case. Then we get to what is my Mount Rushmore of 4 films dealing with war, of any war. This is a little bit tricky, but I'm just going to say the 4 that came to my mind immediately. We're going to start off with 1930s All Quiet on the Western Front. Groundbreaking, trailblazing, wildly ahead of its time, still so resonant and important. This is the genesis point for this type of filmmaking. The second movie I'm going to go with is Elim Klimov's 1985 Come and See, which very much built on All Quiet in telling an anti-war story inside the confines of the hell these people are going through. For my third pick, I'm going to take a Steven Spielberg movie, but I'm going to go 1993's Best Picture winning Schindler's List. It is just perfection. It is beautifully shot, but it is utterly devastating to watch. And finally, I'm going to go with Jonathan Glazer's The Zone of Interest from 2023. It obviously has some parallels to all the previous 3 movies I just listed, but it carves out a frightening place all to its own. It's one of the most soul-shattering theatrical experiences I can recall in my entire life. The next question was, is the opening scene where the American troops storm the beach at Normandy the most intense or the most anxiety-inducing piece of filmmaking in any war movie? It's really hard to think of another that's so well orchestrated and constructed, but I'm going to let my wife's reaction to this movie be the verdict for me. I remember she sat down with me to watch this once and only once in our life, and immediately she started having a panic attack from the anxiety the movie hits you with right away. And now it's sort of become a running joke in our house whenever I suggest a movie that might lead to the same anxious feelings. And then, did Steven Spielberg deserve to win the Oscar for Best Director that year? I'm going to say he absolutely did in my eyes. I think what he does on a technical level is hard to argue with. I gave him my win when we covered that year in season 1 of the show. And for those that don't remember that episode, here are the 4 other directors I nominated alongside Spielberg. I nominated the Coen brothers for The Big Lebowski. I nominated Terry Gilliam for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I nominated Wes Anderson for Rushmore. And I nominated Peter Weir for The Truman Show. And the final question I'm going to answer here is on the 1998 Almanac episode in season 1, Saving Private Ryan beat Shakespeare in Love, which was the actual Best Picture winner. Were we and the voters correct in determining this as the best film of 1998? And if not, what movie do you think should be considered the best of that year? So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to say I don't hate this particular win for Saving Private Ryan in revised Best Picture. However, I fared another movie when we did that episode, and that's not even counting The Thin Red Line, which I think I'd probably say is more worthy of Best Picture in totality. But my pick for the best movie of 1998 is, and will probably remain The Truman Show, which I think is just incredible fun to spend time with, but it also hits on several emotional levels, and it's eye-opening with how much we now live in a world of reality TV and documenting our lives throughout social media at all times. So those are the first half of my answers to the questions listed. I've got more questions on the way and more answers from me on the second part of this collaboration, which will drop on Friday, November 28th. And I will be bringing 9 more contributors to that portion of the project. So thanks for being here to listen to this. Make sure you come back in a few days for part 2 of the collaboration. I'm Andrew, and I cannot wait to see you next time.